Okay.
All right. Call the meeting of the West Dakota Water Development District meeting for our March meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. We stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you please stand for the invocation? Mr. Bialata.
Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Pray that all the sick in the world are healed, and pray that all are healed, stay well. Make sure everybody washes their hands. Dear Almighty, let's keep this at bay. Amen.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the calling of the roll call. Mr. Manali.
Roll call. Cole.
Here.
Yerke.
Here.
Driscoll.
Here.
Jovic.
Here.
Rollinger. Williams.
Here.
Mack.
Here.
Bialata.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
We have 8 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of the agenda as presented.
Move to approve.
Moved by Tom Mack, seconded by Ron Pope. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Ball.
In the past, have we announced vacancies just at the term of election, or only if nobody came forward during the election period?
I didn't hear what you said.
Have we ever announced for vacancies during open election prior, or only after no one submitted for the election? On number 14.
Well, item 13 is the one. Is what you're talking about, Director Zollinger?
No.
Item 14 is.
Vacancy announcements due to expiring terms, when the terms haven't expired yet until January.
What?
It'd be a little early to advertise vacancies for January 1st of 2021.
Dan, do you want to speak to that?
Okay, so you're talking about areas 2, 4, 6. Okay.
Yeah.
That's defined in codified law.
So just that it's up for election.
We have to advertise twice, and that's in the packet. It defines the time range that we have to advertise, and that's really our only duty. Everything else is the Secretary of State.
Okay.
The vacancy for Area 5, that's a separate deal.
Right. No, I was talking about number 14.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Any other comments on the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 5 is approval of the minutes from the January 14th meeting.
Move to approve.
Moved by Driscoll. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mack. Discussion.
Here. On number 13,
Yes.
in the minutes, where it said that I think the EPA should have been notified, that should say I think the EPA should have been notified on the second time homeowners were affected, because the city did not notify the EPA each time as required by law.
And which item did you say that was?
13.
13 at the bottom of the page. Last line.
And you want us to add that
That
they
the
should have
EPA
been notified after the second event?
Correct. As required by law. They're required to notify the EPA each event, regardless of how many times it happens.
Okay. So is there an amendment to the motion then?
I would amend it that it should say that EPA should have been notified on the second time that the relative homeowners were affected as well.
Okay. So the motion is for approval
Second.
with the addition as mentioned. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 6 is a standard item of each agenda, conflict of interest. Are there any directors that would have any items that are under discussion that would be a conflict of interest this evening?
I may have an appearance of conflict of interest with item 11. I will abstain from that.
Okay, item 11. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, the treasurer's report. Dan?
Okay. Not too much to report, but let me scroll down here. So currently, we have about $525,000 in our two accounts. Haven't really spent anything this year other than administration costs. So if there are no questions there, I'll move on to the next one, which is the unpaid project obligations. So if we add up USGS canyon lake sampling, the stream gauges, and the $5,000 on-site wastewater treatment for Marty Lundell, comes out to $38,600.
Any questions on the treasurer's report? I entertain a motion for approval.
Move to approve.
Moved by Mac. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Cole. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Who did the second?
Cole. Okay, that brings us to item number 8, presentation from Jesse Wilkins and Chris Dozark from the DENR on possible collaboration on rotating basin projects. Mr. Williams.
Okay, first time I had a chance to meet him was this evening, but as far as I understand, it's a program that would do water sampling in various regions throughout this area that we're on the basin that you pick. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah, so it's Jesse Wilkins and Chris Dovak.
You want the rotating basins one first?
That's fine, either way is fine. I'm Chris Dozark, to work with Environment and Natural Resources. I don't understand.
Stand kind of close to one of these mics, so
All right, perfect.
we are recording.
Is this good here so I can see up there?
There you go.
Yeah, that's
Perfect.
good.
So, a couple of years ago, we decided kind of to go to this approach for some sampling in the state. Can I hit the next slide? So just a little background on kind of how we've been sampling up to this point. Linda obviously has a lot of experience in ambient water quality monitoring. Right now around the state there's about 150 monitoring sites. They are sampled either monthly or quarterly, as well as Jesse's kind of our statewide lake assessment guy. And the way that we used to sample is we would kind of do this randomized approach with the 575 listed lakes in our state. The advantage of that is it allowed DENR to kind of make an inference as the whole population in the state, but we found out pretty quickly that we were really lacking individual assessments for different lakes. So next slide. All of this kind of ties into the integrated report, which is kind of our, every 2 years we have to write a report. It's required under the Clean Water Act. And it basically, we assess waters throughout the state and then decide if they're either impaired or unimpaired based on these different criteria for impairments. So there's things such as like the length of time that you can look at samples, the total number of samples that you get, exceedance rates for the different parameters that you have, and as well as such things as like profiles in lakes. So with our previous statewide lake assessment, as well as the ambient. We were kind of falling short on some of these samples and getting enough samples to really assess a water body to see if it was impaired or not. Next slide, please. So basically, these are just, I have three examples. You can, since it's a pretty heavy agenda, we can skip ahead a couple slides, and I'll just go to the Belle-Fourche River one. All of these just kind of point out our kind of lack of sampling and how we're assessing things. So just looking at segment 3 of the Belle-Fourche River, right now in the integrated report, it's listed for E. coli, which is the beneficial, E. coli falls underneath the beneficial use of emergent recreation, which has a standard of 235 numbers per 100 mils. And it's only judged for the recreation season, so May through September. So for this one WQM site, it was a quarterly site, which meant it was being sampled February, May, August, and November. So right there with E. coli, you throw 2 of those samples out. And then basically 10 samples were taken from October 2013 through September 2018. So that's kind of what we were judging if the Belle-Fourche River was meeting its beneficial uses or not. So we had 3 samples that exceeded May 14th, August 16th, and August 19th of those years. So based on those 3 samples, we listed it as impaired. So in our mind, we're kind of looking at, is that really a fair assessment of the water body as a whole? So a lot of states are going to this rotating basin approach. You can go next slide. And what it is, sorry, I was looking at forgot about this part. Along with our rotating basin, we switched up our statewide lake assessment as well. We're kind of going to a more targeted approach, really addressing lakes that have more recreational, activities, maybe our water quality or drinking water supplies, that type of stuff. We're kind of targeting them a little more, really trying to get data on those to make sure that we get a fair assessment on those lakes. Next slide, please, sorry. So with the rotating basin approach, many other states are also doing rotating basin. And what we're doing is we're kind of doing these different segments in the state, really hitting all the water bodies that are in those basins for 2 years, and really getting, maybe probably getting 2 samples a month, as well as monthly samples on lakes. So we're really trying to build up our capacity to assess these different units. The plan is to kind of go across the whole state in a 10-year period. Next slide, please. So the first one is the Big Sioux, Red, and Minnesota River basins. We're looking at 42 streams, again, sampled twice monthly, and 22 lakes. And the reason we're doing this is it kind of gets to those data needs for assessing in the integrated report, as well as developing TMDLs once we find impaired water bodies, and then also tying that to future watershed implementation in those areas. And then, with that 10-year cycle, we'll come back around and then reassess everything. With the Big Sioux, right now we got these different partners on board. East Dakota Water Development District, the Day County Conservation District's going to kind of take the lakes that are in the northeast part of the state. City of Watertown's going to sample both Lake Kampesca and Lake Pelican. And then the Friends of the Big Sioux River are going to help take some stuff maybe around Sioux Falls and that type of stuff. Final slide, please. So this is kind of the schedule for the different basins. I do have a handout with that kind of the basin schedule and the different basins throughout the state. I can hand that out here in a minute. But this is kind of what we're thinking as far as how we're going to go across the state. The Big Sioux is probably going to be first a couple of years, and then we're going to drop into the kind of lower James, Niobrara, lower Missouri, Right now, we have an implementation project that's already sampling a little bit down there, so we're just gonna beef up the samples in that lower James area. The 5th and 6th year is gonna be kind of the upper James, upper Missouri, and then 7 through 10 is gonna be basically West River, so that's kind of what our future is looking for, I guess, in the upcoming years and kind of where we're going at this point. But at this point, I'll take any questions.
Thanks.
Any questions? Dan?
Dan on this side.
Yeah, thanks for coming out, Chris.
Yep, absolutely.
So if we get involved with this, then there would be reimbursement from the state to
Yep.
cover the costs?
So, and it really, some of it would depend on what funding source we're getting from. Right now, we have 106, 604B, and 319, which are all Clean Water Act grant funds. The only one that requires match would be 319, and that would be like a 60-40 match, so we would give you 60% of the overall total, so,
Okay.
you know, if it costs $100, we give you 60, you guys would hopefully pick up 40, but right now, we're kind of working with all three grant funds and kind of taking a piece here and a piece there to kind of fit this together, but as time goes on, I think we will get a better handle on that type of stuff.
James is first in.
So if we go forward with this, are you going to be asking for funds in 7 to 10 years?
The funds would only happen if we use 319 funds. Other than that, we would probably provide most of the funding.
Okay.
We're just looking, at this point, we would basically just be looking for basically a partner to kind of run the project through and get, you know, the people that actually go out and do the sampling. That'd probably be the hardest part.
And we'd be part of the second presentation? Which
That
is
would be, yeah, so the second
One.
presentation is kind of the, kind of citizens monitoring, the kind of early part of this. If we started sampling, doing a little sampling now
So
to
this
get
is
your
good.
feet wet.
So this is going to be statewide, you're going to have each of those regions sampled at the same time?
Not at the same time, it'll be over.
You'll target
Yeah.
each, and we
Yeah.
might be able to get on the list for targeted water
Right.
sampling and so forth?
So, did I understand you, the people that are partners, like you mentioned there, East Dakota, City of Watertown and so forth,
Yep.
they're going to provide personnel to do
Yep.
the sampling?
Yep. And then we will reimburse them.
And then who does the lab work?
All the lab work goes to the state health lab in Pierre.
And who pays for that?
We would.
Who pays for
DNR
that?
would, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Dan?
So what constitutes year one?
What's that?
When does year one start?
Year one starts this year.
Okay, so,
2020.
so the West River stuff is
It'd be
more or less 7 years down the
2027,
road. It'd
2029.
be 5 years before you'd really be planning seriously
Yep.
for it.
Yep.
5 or 6 years.
And even if there was interest, strong interest now, it's still 7 years out?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Like Jesse will kind of touch on some of the citizens monitoring stuff that we have going on throughout the state now. We're actually picking up quite a few groups that are interested in sampling, and Jesse's helped out getting those guys set up, so. Yeah.
How many staff does your department have that are available to do this kind of work?
Our staff personally would not do any of the work. Right now with the Sioux Falls stuff, East Dakota's providing, I think, 3 full-time guys out of theirs. And East Dakota is actually using that as match, like paying their guys for match, so they're a little bit different. But then like once Northeast Glacial Lake, Day County Conservation District and City of Watertown will pay for their salaries when they're doing the sampling, and then provide the funds for the samples as well.
I just,
You have a
sorry,
pretty
I just wanted to get clarification.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So your department has no staff that can do this type of work?
We will probably do some of the like Upper James and like that North Missouri stuff, and possibly some of the West River that doesn't fall within the Black Hills. We will probably do some of that work ourselves, but it really works out better for us to get the partners involved in doing the sampling in their regions. It just helps out us as far as travel costs and that type of stuff.
So you do have staff?
We do have staff in Pier, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
One staff member.
How
here.
many are there?
Let's see, 13 total, but one's out here, two are Sioux Falls,
13?
one is in Vermillion, so we have probably 7 or 8 in the Pier.
Good. Thank you.
Ron, go ahead.
Is it too far out to have a conceptual list of waters for the western?
We are working on getting the kind of what water bodies and stuff like that.
This kind of plays into the second presentation by Jesse, and so, go ahead.
I know people come to us all the time. We have one staff person. He's a part-time office person.
Right.
We don't have a staff.
Yep.
You guys have more staff out here than we do. Yeah.
Right.
Right, and ours is only part-time, and he only does the office work.
Thanks for coming.
You have more staff than us. And knowing this is a political board, for us to commit to something in 7 years, the board could drastically change 5 times and say, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
We're not looking for
every year.
We're not looking for a commitment right now. We're just kind of looking,
Spitballing.
Yeah, providing
Yeah,
this.
FYI kind
It
of
would be a
thing. Yeah.
possibility maybe in 7, 8 years that we might come to you guys. We're just kind of wanting to let you guys know what direction we're going, and
Sure.
at some point the rotating basin will be out here.
Okay. And a question from the public.
So you guys handle all the data then, you file all the data?
Yep.
Is this accessible to anybody else? Or?
Absolutely. That's his presentation here. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Yep,
you.
Thank you. I'll pass that.
Jesse?
I'm Jesse Wilkins. I'm also with Chris in the Watershed Protection Program at the ENR. And so my presentation is called W2 Map. What that is it's this website, the Water Quality Monitoring Access Portal. I designed this as a project to share all of our data. If you wouldn't mind going to the slides, I'll come to the website towards the end. And so, I'm going to breeze through kind of the background of it real quick. What data are we talking about that we share on here? It's our centralized water quality database that we have at DENR, where we house all of this data that we have. And so a lot of it's from our own monitoring that we do, watershed projects that we fund, like the rotating bays and our other projects that we funded in the past. Data that's been submitted to us by water development districts, or that we're collecting in partnership with water development districts. Data from cities, the USGS, and any other volunteer groups. Next slide, please. So that was the water quality data. I also included some other types of data in this. So the fish flesh data, like how much mercury is in the fish. We've done some sampling in the past for heavy metals, PCBs, some pesticides, things that you really don't want in your water. So that data is also available on the website. Next slide, please. How much data are we talking about here? It's quite a bit. So as of about a year and a half ago when I wrote this presentation, about 150,000 samples at about 3,500 locations. And you can see the breakdown of the different kinds of samples there. Next slide, please. And that data in just lab analysis costs is worth over $20 million. And that doesn't include the time, travel, equipment, all the other things that go into water sampling. So it's a pretty sizable thing that we have there. And it wasn't publicly available before I made this website, unless you called us or emailed us and asked. And you may not even known that we had the data. So next slide, please. But it's not just data on the website. I included a lot of other information as well. So a lot of the info that's in the integrated report that Chris mentioned, our every 2-year report that we put out on water quality, a lot of that's in there. Where we have active assessments and improvement projects going on, you You can connect to their websites and see summaries of their projects. TMDL reports and other water quality related reports I also linked on there. I went through all of our bookshelf, all the old reports that we had, and I scanned them and put them on there. So a lot of this stuff, anything that I have access to at work, the public now has access to. Next slide, please. But the main thing that's probably going to be interesting to you guys is the volunteer efforts that have spawned from the creation of this website. So I presented this website at the Non-Point Source Task Force in Pierre, and Dana Lowski from the Friends of the Big Sioux approached me after my presentation and said, we want to collect data and share it on this website. How can we do that? And that wasn't something that I had really considered that much, so we had to figure out how to accommodate that. And I put together, basically, I built the outline for how this could happen, and it all revolves around data quality, ensuring that the data collected by people that aren't professional water samplers is good data, and it's not biased, it's accurate. But on this slide, you can see we've got a few partners that are actively participating in this now. East Dakota is working under this framework. Friends of the Big Sioux River. The Yankton Sierra Club just got involved last year, and it looks like the Vermilion Sierra Club is also going to start doing some sampling and having us host their data on the website. Next slide, please. And so the document that outlines this whole framework is called our Quality Assurance Project Plan, and that lays out who's responsible for what to ensure that the data is collected, managed, and reviewed properly. And so there's kind of two sets of responsibilities here. What the people doing the sampling are responsible for and what we're responsible for. And so the people doing the sampling, the main things are you have to use methods from our standard operating protocols. So so you're collecting samples the right way. You need to get some training, which I provide. One thing you have to do is collect quality assurance, quality control samples. So that's where you collect duplicate samples. You take 2 samples at the exact same time, and that's kind of a way of testing the lab to make sure that they're being analyzed correctly, because the results should be pretty close. And then also 5% blank samples, where you do everything like you're collecting a real sample, but then you fill it up with deionized or distilled water. And that's a way of testing if the sampler is doing things correctly. That sample should come back as not a trace of anything if you did everything right. And then you'll have to do some kind of field audit where somebody, I could even come out and do it, just watches you, collect a sample and says, yep, you did that right. I check it all off on my sheet and everything's cool. But most of these groups do their own thing. They have somebody who's leading the effort, and if they have additional samplers, that person would field audit them. And then every 2 years, you just have to write us a quick 1-page report on the results of your blank and duplicate samples, any issues that you may have encountered. And I help all the different samplers write that. It's not a hard thing to do. And then basically the whole point of this is to collect samples without bias. Next slide, please. And then our responsibilities are to provide that training, provide technical assistance, so answer your questions, teach you how to sample, explain what it all means. One of the most important things that we do is review and approve data before it goes on the website. So I look at the data that anyone collects before it gets uploaded to the website, just to make sure that there's nothing weird in there. Next slide, please. So would you please pull up the website now? Actually, it might be easier to just use my slides.
Okay.
Since I'm not
Things
running
are pretty
the computer.
slow. You could drive if you want, but
the slides is
Okay.
fine. I guess it depends on how much of the website you really want to see, but so just that
this one here.
next one. Is there a way to zoom in? Well, so anyways, if you go on the website, if you click on a lake or a stream, you'll get this little pop-up window, and there's 4 links in there. And if you click on the top one, Water Quality Dashboard, if you go to the next slide, please, that will pull up, sorry, I'll have to zoom out for this one. That'll pull up a series of graphs that shows the last 5 years of data for this stream segment or this lake. So what we're looking at here is the White River segment 2. You see there's a pretty healthy data set there. It's being sampled pretty frequently, and that's the total nitrogen results that you can see there. You can see a few spike samples up high, kind of interesting. If you go to the next slide, please. Here's the total suspended solids graph. We all know the White River carries a ton of sediment, and even with the standards set really high, you can see that there's samples over that line, because I built these graphs to have a standard line so that the public would understand the context of the data, so that they would know what that data is in relation to the water quality standard. Next slide, please. And then we also have the E. coli results in this series of graphs, so you can see how much E. coli is in the water. That one has two standard lines because we have two standards for E. coli. The kind of the chronic threshold, which is the 30-day average, and also the single sample maximum. But those are kind of the main things that you see if you click on a stream and you look at the water quality dashboard. Next slide, please. Then in those other links that were in the pop-up window, this is the data from the integrated report where it looks at those beneficial uses and it lists whether or not they're being supported and basically whether the water quality standards are being met. You can see the White River is impaired for salinity and also E. coli. Next slide, please. And so lakes show up just a little bit different. So if we looked at Pactola and you looked at that water quality dashboard, next slide, please. Instead of standard lines on some of the lakes, other than E. coli, what we did is we put in a moving average. So you could compare your lake to other lakes in the region. And that moving average is actually of a region. We have 4 lake regions in South Dakota. This compares Pactola to other lakes in the Black Hills. So you can see how Pactola compares to other somewhat similar lakes. And there's the Northeast Lakes region, the rest of the Eastern Lakes, and then kind of Western Prairie Lakes, or the 4 lake regions. And that's the chlorophyll concentration, so that's how much total algae is in the water pretty much. And you can see Pactola is pretty clear. Next slide, please. And also we put the Secchi disc results. That's where you lower a black and white disc down into the water and see how clear the water is. And we know Pactola is really clear. Next slide, please. This graph is where I included in some of the mercury results in the fish flesh. And if you're looking at the website, if you hover your mouse over one of those dots, each dot is an individual fish, and it shows you the fish species and the length of the fish. And mercury accumulates in different fish species at different rates. Primarily accumulates more in predator fish, so like walleyes, largemouth bass, pike. So this has been really handy, at least for me personally as a fisherman and other people that I've talked to. If I'm going fishing, I can target different sizes and species of fish that have less mercury. So I'm then informed of what species put me at the greatest risk, or my kids, or my pregnant wife, or whatever it might be. Next, is that my last slide?
That's the last one.
Okay, I went pretty fast. But that in the gist is the website, and the groups are collecting data in this framework right now. Their data is being shown on the website, and it was really a big challenge to get that set up. There was, some internal, what's the right word? Nervousness about hosting outside data on our website, but it's gone very well, primarily because of that focus on data quality. And we don't want anybody out just winging it, or like targeting things to try to get somebody in trouble. We're trying to collect, routine data. So we want a plan in place where I'm going to sample these sites, and I'm going to sample them at this frequency. Rather than I'm just going to run around and, I like that stream right there, I'm going to run over there and get a sample. So we want it to be really organized and really quality focused. Does anybody have any questions?
How many hits are you getting on that website?
I don't know.
Okay, I was just curious.
I don't even know how to check, to tell you the truth. Yep.
Any other questions?
As far as I know, Western Dakota Tech has an environmental engineering technician program. Have you guys thought about having them work with you on gathering samples?
I have not, no. I wasn't aware of that. This has just got off the ground about a year ago. It's really in the infant stages yet, and coming out here to talk to you guys is one of the first steps in kind of coming out into this part of the state and seeing if anybody would be interested in collecting some data. I'm scheduled to present at the Western Hydrology Conference in April too, and I was hoping to have some more folks from out this way have a chance to get a look at it there as well. But yeah, if you got contact info, that'd be great.
I have a question about the type of E. coli that you're collecting. Have you split out animal from human or
No.
any of that?
No, we haven't done any bacterial source tracking. We tried that in the past with not the best results. I think that the technology's probably gotten a bit better since then. But as far as we're concerned, when we're looking at water standards, it doesn't really matter where it came from in terms of whether or not the water is meeting the standard. If you're trying to figure out the source and reduce the source, then yeah, it would be a valuable thing.
Yeah.
But I kind of set it up with the volunteer sampling so that groups can sample what they're interested in and where they're interested.
Yeah. The reason I ask is we did a large study of Rapid Creek, and we have an 8-mile reach where there appears to be E. coli being introduced in that 8 miles. We know that it's going to probably be goose or dog, but there aren't any human sources that are found below the Canyon Lake Dam. And so making that breakout in the DNA of the type of E. coli that you get is kind of important.
Sure.
And would that be something that if we collected it, I mean, I know it's going to be years from now, but if we collected it, we could place that data in your system or not?
I'm not sure, our database isn't really set up for that, and the website isn't. I would totally facilitate your efforts to collect that data. That's kind of the technical assistance part. Like the Yankton Sierra Club wants to test some pesticides. That's not something that I have much experience in, but I'm going to help them figure that out, find a lab that will do it. So I would help you figure that out, but this you could start this year if you wanted to. There's no time frame on this. It's kind of whenever anybody wants to start going. I'd help get you set up with where to have with the lab to have your samples analyzed at. I'm not sure if I'd have you send them to the health lab or do them at Mid-Continent here. Haven't really broached that.
Well,
subject yet.
we contracted with Mid-Continent.
Okay, then that would be the way to do it. So the one thing would be that your data wouldn't go up on the website as fast because we don't get the data from Mid-Continent electronically like we do from the State Health Lab. Because like from the State Health Lab, it takes about 5 days after samples given to them, and the data then shows up at my computer, and then I review and approve it before it goes to the website.
Well, the length of time between collection and the testing is like a day.
Sure.
So, and it has to be under the right conditions and things, so.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, but thanks. Thank you.
I was just going to mention, kind of tying in, the person that did that research, her name is Kelsey Murray. That was her PhD project, I believe. And so now Dr. Murray, I think, is the head of that environmental engineering technician program at WDT.
Yeah, she is.
So, Dr. Kelsey Murray, so if you wanted to contact, I think that would be a good bet.
Sure. Well, and the one thing is the group that does the sampling pays for the sample analysis. We're not funding this. It's more if somebody has some money and they want to use it for monitoring, we'll help you do that, but we don't pay for the samples. So if they had some funding, we could make that work.
Dan, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks for coming out, Jesse. Do you get data from the Rapid City wastewater treatment plant?
I don't. That would be DMR data probably, wouldn't it?
So it seems like that would be pretty valuable for your database.
Yeah, that's kind of a different type of data than we're talking about. That's where they're monitoring the wastewater effluent. We're looking more at surface water with this website.
So you look at E. coli.
Yeah, so we're looking at E. coli in the stream rather than what's coming out of the pipe.
Oh, they do have a sampling station. Yeah.
Sure, but the DMR data, they're sampling what the facility is discharging, whereas what we present on this website is if you went out and took a sample out of the stream. So, I mean, you could sample right below the wastewater treatment.
Well, they sample it above the treatment plant.
Because of our study, they started sampling in advance of the outflow, just 10 feet ahead of it. And we're able to find, that's how we know that there's a problem. past the East St. Patrick Street Bridge at PNR was noticing high levels of E. coli in human waste, that sort of thing. But then just ahead of the waste treatment plant, we were also seeing high levels of waste. That's how I know I have an 8-mile reach without any, we don't have a sampling site in that space.
Yeah, but I mean, if you guys wanted to set up sampling sites to do that, that's something that we could totally help you with and post the data. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming
Thank you.
out. Appreciate it. Okay, moving along on the agenda, number 9, Barry Muxon.
Okay, Barry Muxon is part of Dakota Rural Action Clean Water Alliance. They're in opposition of the F3 gold mine. We had invited F3 to a previous meeting a couple months ago. Barry just wants to give some counterpoints. This is a discussion topic only, and no request of action.
Okay, well, mine, I'm going to be very brief. What I have here is a plot of the gold mine claims in the Black Hills around Rochford and Silver City. The ones in gold are on private property. Can't do much about that. But the ones in red are in Forest Service land. And if you'll note, this is Lake Dakota, right in the middle. And a lot of these claims touch the shoreline. You're not going to do mountaintop removal or pit mining. It's going to be chemical extraction. That means settlement ponds, et cetera. Big rain events could overtop, run into the creek, run into Pactola, move the water for Rapid City and Ellsworth. Now, John Hopkins, who lives up in Rochford, has photos of a truck that MMR, the ones that are doing the private land, were using water from lead to lubricate their grills. One of the trucks ran off the road, tipped over, the tank separated from the truck and drained into Rapid Creek. Luckily, it was water from lead and not something else. So those are the risks that are out there, and I just want everybody to be aware of it. And we can't stop them from exploring, and the Forest Service can put regulation on how they mine, but they don't seem to be too willing to do anything to prevent it. So that's kind of where we stand, and we are continuing to oppose these efforts. And I'd like to also include, there may be additional stress down around Edgemont, Dewey Burdock. Feds want to increase the nuclear stockpile, so I can probably count on additional pressure to get some of that done down there. And my closing thing is World Water Day on the 21st of March at the Journey. There will be a 2-hour panel question and answer period to the chairman of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. Charles Frazier will be there as a panelist. Rapid City Council President Laura Armstrong will be present. Former Mayor Don Barnett will be there, as well as State Senator Red Dawn Foster. And there will be a reception following that recent Magpie, and they encourage you to bring your own dinnerware.
Barry, what was the date?
What was the date
The
again?
21st of March from 2 to 4.
At
And
the
there will
Journey.
be a water walk from the Journey down to the creek to get some water to bring back to the Journey at 1:30. I want to participate in that. Any questions?
Any questions for Gary? Okay, well, thanks.
Keep my time.
Thanks for the, you did, thanks for the update. Okay, item number 10, action on a letter expressing support for a group of landowners who are opposing proposed conditional use and water rights permits for the proposed RV park near Rockerville. Dan, this one.
I'm down here.
There you are.
This will be an action item. I'll need to provide a little bit of background for context, folks that weren't here at our January meeting. During our January meeting, we were approached by a couple of what I've referred to as landowner groups from the Rockerville area, voicing concerns about a proposed RV park in the area. Their concerns were basically twofold. One is regarding the availability of water, that they've been in a situation of declining production in their production wells. They are served by, basically there's a Pine Haven group that utilizes 2 shared wells, and the production of those has been declining for a number of years. They have installed, a number of things to try to address the problem. They've had, wells tested, pumps tested. They've installed basically flow limiting devices, 1 gallon per minute, for all of the landowners or homeowners that are served on this. They've all had to install, or the majority, cisterns to get by. They've had a real problem there, and the proposed development, would propose to utilize quite a bit of water. They've applied for a water rights permit, and that's one of the things that this action would address. The other primary concern is relative to water quality. They've been seeing increasing nitrate concentrations in the wells in that area. The proposed RV park, my understanding is it's not 100% clear what would be used as a waste disposal mechanism, but it seems like, it's along the lines of a large septic system. We'll hear more about that tonight, I expect. In your packet, there's a 1-page summary that was provided by the Pine Haven group, that basically summarizes the information that they brought, 2 months ago. And I guess my sense is that we really didn't need to go through all of this again. I told them I would summarize, and once I've made my motion, they could have an opportunity to let us know if there's anything, that's new that wasn't presented before. I would envision that, directors would have a chance then to ask if there's any clarifications needed. And then I've invited Justin Eisenbraun, who is in essence the primary in the proposed RV system, to provide his perspective. To me, when we looked at this 2 months ago, I couldn't see bringing this up as an action item. If we're going to take action on it, it's something where we need to hear all sides of the situation. So because I guess the concerns that they brought to us, it was sort of the sense of the board that there really are some concerns there that really fall within West Dakota purview. It's kind of an unusual situation for us in that, most typically we're working with things to help encourage development and put water delivery systems or the like into place. And, I'm not really aware that West Dakota's ever been involved in a situation like this. I've been, a little bit reluctant to open a can of worms where we're in opposition to things, but, the sense of the group was that, there's enough concern that we really ought to look at that. So in your packet on page 20, there's a letter that I had drafted, because the way we tend to do business, we've got to have specific wording that we would be able to address. And so basically this letter says that, we support the concerns of this group to the extent that, we would oppose the conditional use permit that's being applied for to the county, and also the water rights permit that's being applied to from DENR. Basically, the last sentence of the letter states that West Dakota would withdraw its opposition if, number one, the water supply would be obtained from a remote location that would not adversely affect the existing residents. And I think we could say, if this can be accomplished in any fashion, that, the water supply is not a concern. And then secondly, wastewater disposal can be accomplished without adverse effects to the water resources. So with that as background, I don't know, probably you're not going to be able to read that, but my motion would be that, for approval of this letter expressing support for the landowner group, per the draft that's included in our our packet here.
Is there a second to the motion? You second it? Ron Colt is seconding it. So we're open for discussion on the motion.
Well, I think,
Chairman?
first, if I might, Mr. Chairman, ask if we could have, as I'd asked the landowner group, identify if there's any new information they need to bring forward, then questions from the directors, if any clarifications, and then Mr. Eisenbraun to be able to present his things. I'd like to do those things before we have our full-fledged discussion, if we could.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Well, we already heard from the group last time. Why don't we start with the landowner this time?
This is my item. I would like just to ask
Right,
the landowners.
You're wanting to throw a
Mr.
landowner.
Bialotta.
I had the floor. I was recognized. You didn't get the
Mr.
right to
Chair.
speak.
Just a second.
You want to tell a landowner that he can't drill a well on his own property. Now, let's say he wants to put a RV park there, or it ends up being his personal home. You don't want somebody coming into the courts and saying, well, you have 70 acres, but you're going to have to go to Rapid City to get your water. I find that disgusting at best, and not giving that gentleman the right to speak after you gave somebody else the floor first is just plain rude.
Well,
We have their words in front of us, and they got to speak to us. I have their idea. I don't have his.
What Director Driscoll said is if there's some discussion here that's new, additional information, is the way I understand you, what you'd like from the group that was here at the last meeting to speak
Right,
first.
only new stuff. Is there anything new?
Yeah, so let's just handle it that way. Is there anything new from the group that was here at the last meeting?
My name is Lon Buter, and I presented to you the last meeting. I've only got 2 items that are new. I can clarify the timing of the water rights permit hearing in Pier. I believe it's going to be held the first week in May. So that's a little clarification. We didn't know the timing of it before. The other thing that isn't directly tied to this, but I wanted to bring to your attention is Pennington County is currently assessing a proposed planned unit development in Rockerville, in the median between the highways, where a developer wants to put in roughly 100 units, duplex, triplex, and fourplex. So that process is under review with Pennington County. I just was going to make you aware of that. That's all I had to tell you.
Okay, very good. Yeah, go ahead. Question?
Yeah, the last time you guys presented, I asked you a question as far as whether or not you guys have tried to work with this developer to try to come up with a common solution. And I didn't hear a yes to that last time. Has there been any attempt within the last 2 months to try to work with that person to try to come up with a?
There was a proposal, and when Justin speaks or Mr. Eisenbraun speaks, he can provide whatever information he wants to provide. He had presented a proposal to a group of homeowners about potentially buying some buffer acreage that they were not interested in pursuing. There has not been any discussion with regard to resolving the water quantity and water quality issues.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm Bill Hunt. I also presented to you last time, and I'm the one that said that, it's been my well, that was the first one that's gone over the nitrate level. And I gave you that information, but I wanted to provide you the 2 tests so you had documented information, just not me saying it. And, when I did the first one, it came back too high. I was hopeful that maybe that was a bad test. So I used a different lab on the second one, but they both came back virtually identical. But here's that data if you want for your records.
Yeah, just go ahead and take it, Dan.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Doesn't look like it, so Justin, you've got the floor.
Just got a few things here, that'll take 2 minutes. In 2019, we bought 19.41 acres of ground in Rockville that was already zoned highway services when we bought it. We have applied for a permit for 4 acre-feet of water, or 1,303,405 gallons per year. The permit we applied for has a maximum flow rate of 20 gallons per minute flow. We have been told by our neighboring homeowners, which some are here tonight, that they would have no problem with our plan or permit if we were to build residential 3-acre lots, like what they have. So let's do the math together on the 19.41 acres. We could put 6 homes on these sites, which would mean digging 6 wells instead of 2 on this piece of property. Each private well could produce, under South Dakota, up to 18 gallons per minute flow allowed by the state. So 6 wells times 18 gallons per minute times 1,440 minutes a day times 365 days a year equals 56,764,800 gallons per year, or 174 acre feet of water. I know this is probably extreme, but if you drill your own well and you don't have to pay for water, you certainly can put an automatic sprinkler system in and use quite a bit of water per acre to keep your lawn nice. Our local golf course in Wall has about exactly 19.4 acres under irrigation. They used 13 million gallons of water last year on a wet year. Our RV park will be closed for 6 months out of the year, which will allow the water tables beneath our ground to recharge. As you can see from the state's chief engineer report, which is in front of you, that I brought, the research has concluded that the probability that we will affect the neighboring homeowners is very, very low. Most of their wells are 200 feet or less. We are planning on drilling 400 feet plus. As for the sewers situation, we are putting in an oversized 2-zone pressurized mound system. It will be sealed on the bottom side of it, so effluent water cannot go into groundwater. Being as a commercial system, we will have to hire a professional third party to monitor our system to make sure it's safe and not leaking. We have done nothing on this ground as of yet. So the existing nitrate and coliform bacteria is from the homeowner's sewers. They have leach fields. They are not nearly as safe as what we will be putting in. So we will be using less water than what could be potentially used if it was changed to 3-acre lots, and our wastewater is going to be a heck of a lot safer than what's going on with the existing homeowners now. I've dropped off a report. It's from the Department of Natural Resources Chief Engineer. I'd like to read a little bit of it to you. You guys can follow along if you'd like. Pursuant with South Dakota 46282 on the first page, the following is a recommendation of the Chief Engineer, Water Rights Program, Department of Environment and Natural Resources concerning water permit application 2805 RJLC, care of Justin Eisenbrown. The Chief Engineer is recommending approval of this application. There is a reasonable probability that there is unappropriated water available for the applicant's purpose use. Proposed division can be developed without unlawful impairment of the existing rights. Proposed use is beneficial use and is public interest with the following qualifications. The wells approved under this permit will be located near domestic wells and other wells which may obtain water from the same aquifer. The well owner under the permit shall control his water flow so there is no reduction of needed water supplies to adequate domestic wells and the adequate wells having prior water rights. The wells authorized by permit number 2805 shall be constructed by a licensed well driller and construction of the well and installation of the pump shall comply with Water Management Board Construction Rules Charter 2740204 within the well case pressure coded, so 74020428. The permit holder shall report to the Chief Engineer annually on the amount of water withdrawn from the crystalline rock aquifer. Water permit number 285 authorizes a total annual division of 4 acre feet of water. On page 2, the highlighted yellow area. Based on the estimate exposed area of 574,000 acres in water-bearing material to a depth of 500 feet and an estimated and an effective porosity of 1%, estimated the amount of recoverable важор in the stage of the crystalline rock aquifer in western South Dakota is 2,900,000 acre feet. Due to the unpredicted nature of the secondary porosity of the very low primary porosity of the crystalline rock, it is very difficult to determine if the aquifer is underconformed under confined or unconfined conditions, depending on exactly what depth the secondary porosity of the encountered in the well bore and the water level in the well compared to the secondary consistency features. The well may change from acting as a confined well to an unconfined well in various water levels that are not comparable in adjacent wells completed in the same aquifer. On page 2, this is a map of all the wells in the area that have water rights, according to the state. On page 3, the hydraulic budget recharge. The crystalline rock aquifers are recharged through the infiltration and precipitation and stream flow losses. Driscoll and Carter, 2001. Driscoll and Carter, 2001, estimate the recharge to this entry of the crystalline rock aquifers within the core of the Black Hills to be equal to average withdrawals, 36,000 acre-feet per year, during their period of study, 1950-1998. Driscoll and Carter noted that the actual recharge of the crystalline rock aquifers must be much larger than estimated to account for discharge of streams. Additionally, Driscoll and Carter, 2001, have large stated in regard of the crystalline rock aquifers, recharge conditions are highly transient and have large spatial variability. Thus, quantifications is not attempted. While looking at faults and other significant geological features may allow for the same limited or aerial extent, there is not sufficient data available to attempt a delineation of the localized crystalline rock aquifer with any level of certainty. Therefore, there is no average annual recharge estimate available for this localized crystalline rock aquifer applied for purpose to use. On page 4. If you notice, we applied for 4 acre-feet of water per year. We would be the second lowest in this area. They're anywhere from 56.5 acre-feet of water down to 1.7. We're asking for 4 acre-feet of water. On page 6, figure 3 was highlighted. Figure 3 is a view of the crystalline rock aquifer water rights within approximately 1 mile of the proposed well sites. The nearest well authorized by a water right to either of the well sites proposed by this application, the water rights number 21112 are approximately 0.17 miles or 920 feet west-southwest of the proposed well site. All the other wells authorized by water rights are approximately 0.35 miles or further away from this well site proposed by this application. Considering the proximity of the other water rights in this area to each other, without any reports or well interferences issues between these water rights and nearby domestic users, and the limited diversion rate requested by this application, there is a reasonable probability this application can be developed without unlawful impairments to existing appropriate users of the crystalline rock aquifer. That's all I have.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, I have a question. On your permit application, it says the wells will be 150 to 600 feet. You said you're going to drill 400-foot wells?
400 plus.
400 plus, okay. Yes.
Regarding the hydraulic budget, I'm just wondering if Director Driscoll would like to adjust his notes since that's his name in that paragraph.
What's your question again, Mr. Bialov?
I just want to know if on page 3 you'd like to adjust your notes. Have those numbers changed since you wrote that book for that study?
The estimates, anybody could make any estimates, but, the book was written as it was written, that report written as it was written, and I'm not aware of anybody who has, made any update to it. I guess I could ask Bill Eldridge, who's in the office, works for USGS. Are you aware, and you work a lot in the groundwater business, are you aware of any particular work that makes any particular adjustments to those estimates?
Not for the Precambrian corridor. Not for aquifers in the Precambrian.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So knowing that you have a direct knowledge and you've previously studied this area, Mr. Driscoll, I'm wondering why you're suggesting this man don't have water.
What is the basis of your question?
Your base is saying there's 36,000 acre feet of water per year in that area, and you're telling me there's not enough water for this man to get 4 acre feet all of a sudden?
So that's 3,600 acre feet per year, not 36,000.
I'm sorry, 3,600 feet. He only wants 4.
Right, and that is spread across the outcrop area of the entire Black Hills, the interior Black Hills. It's everything within a ring of sedimentary rocks that ring the Black Hills. You know, I don't have the capability, you know, to do the math sitting here, but it's a number of hundreds of square miles, which accounts to many thousands of acres, and it ends up, you know, what the permit would be for 4 acre feet per year over what is the size of your acreage?
19.41.
Right. So if you do the math on that, it requires a lot of recharge to recharge 4 acre feet from that amount of area. Had you done similar computations on that, Mr. Buhner?
Yes, I am.
And you had presented those at the last meeting, correct?
I don't recall if I presented the recharge information that I had calculated.
Or was perhaps that was in your information presented to DENR relative to how much recharge would be required upon that acreage? But
I have furnished that information in my petition opposing the water rights, and a lot of the numbers and discussion that are in that report, I have furnished information to DENR as well as Mr. Eisenhower on my concern.
right. I don't recall the exact numbers you had used, but it's you know, it's quite a bit more than the standing estimate of that inch or two of recharge per year, if I recall.
I think where you guys are using about 36,000 and 3,600. If you look on page 1, the report's estimate is 474,000 acres in this area, with 2.9 million acre feet of water in this area. Which would, if you do the math, is about, 5.5 acre feet per acre?
Yep.
Below you?
Yep. And he's got 20.
My math is pretty close.
Was this from Dr. Ron's estimation? Is that
That's from the chief engineer.
well, I'm just reading the paragraph. It says Ron, 1979, which is Dr. Perry Ron.
And Mr. Chair, may I also remind everybody, the Rockerville Trading Post, I think it sits on 12 acres, and they're getting almost 60 acre feet a year, or 60 acres.
They have a permit for that, but they won't be getting it.
And he's only asking for 4.
Well, I don't know if we know, sitting here, if they're using 60 acre feet. They may have a permit for that, but it may not be available either. It's hard for us to sit here and know that unless we have some data that would. I don't know how much water they're using.
This is their estimated use, reported use.
Estimated use.
56.5.
If I may comment on that, and I prefer not to get into all the detail, but on their estimated uses, what they have done is they have assumed that they're using 60% of their maximum that they could produce based on their water right permit. Now,
that's
the
common.
issue, if you get into the detail, is places like the gas light, you don't see that on there. They don't apparently have a current water right permit. The motel, they transferred that water right to the trading or general
Right,
store
it's all owned by the same
in
folks.
1991. So that's operating without a water right permit. If you look at just the general area and you include those water rights where you have such a large water right that was granted back in 1940s, 1950s, they actually need 5 feet of recharge every year to be able to produce that volume. But yet we only get 18 inches of rain a year. And of those 18 inches, there's some documentation that says maybe 2 inches at maximum can get down to recharge. So there's a lot of issues that are associated with those numbers. And again, all I can tell you is I have furnished DENR, I did not get into that detail here, our well invoice information that shows that we have wells that literally have not produced periodically, and at best during dry times make less than 1 gallon per minute from that well. We have 5 gallon per minute pumps in our shared wells, and after we had pulled the pump tested fine and we ran it in and we turned that well on, it produced for 1 minute for 3 times, 5 minutes for 1 time, 3 minutes for 1 time. Those were the 5 years where we had done those kinds of work. That's how difficult it is for a recharge to get into our wells.
Is there
And the other thing I would say is I think that in your packet there was some information that, again, I have prepared that I will be talking about to DENR at the water rights hearing. There's roughly 50 domestic wells that have been drilled in the 4-section area surrounding the proposal. And those 50 wells, if you look at the volume or the area, the number of wells you would have to drill in the Black Hills to produce a water on that same density would be 60,000 water wells. So when you talk about the water that they say is recoverable over the whole hills, over that outcrop, I've done a calculation. That area is so big, that's about 5/8 of an inch of water. So it's not much water. So it sounds like a big number, but when you look at the area, it's really not that much. So the issue that we do have is, and I've talked to the county about this, and I've furnished information to DENR, there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the water rights, period, because there's a lot of properties in that area that currently do not have a water right and aren't even included in the report, and then you have a problem where they're making assumptions based on the existing water right when there aren't even facilities and buildings there.
Okay. Any other?
Nathan, and then I had.
Okay. Nathan, and then you, Dan. Go ahead, Nathan.
The way I see this is that we've got people with nice homes that don't want an RV park coming in next to them. And I don't think it's the role of this board to even get involved in that, much less determine a winner or a loser. I don't think that's our role. I don't think that's in our purview. I think all of this is an inappropriate discussion.
Dan?
You're done?
Yep.
I'll kind of summarize my main perspective and why I decided this is something that West Dakota should address. I shared an initial concern that West Dakota really doesn't want to go here, but protection of water resources is in fact a very important part of our mission. So to me, the main piece of evidence, you can talk about how many acre feet of water here or there or whatever. What I accept as fact is that these, the property owners had started out with wells that had adequate supply, and that supply has been diminishing, primarily from their own limited usage. There are many of these other domestic wells around. The engineer's report has wells located at whatever distance. That's on page 4. Those are the permitted wells. This does not address the 50 or so domestic wells in the area. And what we would attach to this letter as an attachment shows basically locations of wells. That's domestic wells. There are no permits for those. So the main piece of knowledge is that this is a very limited aquifer, and it is already in essence stressed to the limit. The quality of the recharge water, the waste disposal end of it is another concern, but and I would suggest maybe we look at that separately. The one thing I'd point out and make you aware of, Justin, am I reading it correctly on the first page of the state engineer's report that you had pointed out? What is item 1 there? Basically, it says, the second paragraph, the last sentence or part of a sentence, and it says, item 4, it is in the public interest with the following qualifications. And then the second sentence of item 1 there says, the well owner under this permit shall control his withdrawals so there is not a reduction of needed water supplies in adequate domestic wells or inadequate wells having prior water rights. So the way I'm reading that seems to say that if you go out on, say you're granted the water right permit, the conditional use, you implement it, and then it turns out that in essence, you dry up the wells in the neighborhood, the likelihood it may be you're unable to produce the water that you need yourself. I'm aware that there's a motel there that's supposed to be more productive than the others. They speak of production rates, up to 20 gallons a minute, and that's not unusual that you'll see one well that produces quite a bit better than everything else in the area. But, to me, that's kind of an important point. To me, the worst case scenario is you put in a development like that, you invest your money, the well owners go from a problem that's really bad to all of a sudden they have no water. And one of the things, of course, West Dakota can be involved in is putting in water supply systems. If Rockerville, there was mention of this other proposed development in the area, I just don't see how this area can be supplied by groundwater, and the only way that I can see to supply the water for the growth that's being proposed in the Rockerville area is to basically drill a well farther east that can tap the Madison and pump the water to Rockerville. I just see kind of a perfect storm of all these things colliding and problems for everybody. So that's kind of my summary of the situation.
I'm just going to make sure.
Mr. Chair, I've been waiting.
I'd like to comment on this, and especially since you mentioned that item number 1, where you as a well owner, basically, these other permits have a priority date assigned to them. And if you infringe on, if you shut their water off by over pumping, and it's reported by the property owners or whoever you're affecting, you will have to shut your pump down. Are you aware of that?
Yep.
Okay. So, that's why that statement is in there, is to protect those water rights that have a priority date.
There are other homes being built in this area.
Well, they're under the same thing. If these wells that these property owners are here that have a water right for it, that have a priority date higher than yours, and you start pumping your well and you dry up their well, you have to stop pumping. Are you aware of that? Okay. Now, who's next? Bylaw.
Number 1 also states a simple fact that guideline is meant so somebody doesn't take all their acre feet in the course of a month.
Oh, he has a pumping rate here, maximum pumping rate.
Correct, and that's why it's in there.
It's not going to get that much acre feet for that pumping rate.
That's what I'm saying, and that's why that clause is in there. So if somebody's given a water right and they don't take it out all of the month of August, that's why it's in there.
I know that.
Okay, well, you're explaining it to him like he's going to have to shut his thing off every week. But the case of the matter is...
If he dries up the well.
Okay, let me finish. I have the floor, right?
Go ahead.
They've already told us their wells are going dry. If they go in tomorrow and say he ran our wells dry, guess what? We're all witnesses that they had that problem before he started pumping, which is horrible. But being in construction and developing rural property, I've seen hundreds of wells where they have a well here that's dry right next to their house. And they build a well on the opposite side of their house, literally 30 feet away, and they get 10 times the water at the same depth or even shallower. And it's sometimes, unfortunately, the luck of the draw of where you're drilling into the rock. And everybody that's got a home on a well knows that. Because the first thing they want to know from the well driller is how deep we got to go. And I've seen homeowner wells in excess of 600 feet through granite the whole time. And, I just watch homeowners' checkbook getting right into the drill bit, just getting ground up. That being said, the neighbor on the next lot with a house less than 60 feet away hit water at 50 feet. It was just dumb luck. It's not because the neighbor next door had a better well, a better pump. It was just simply a luckier spot. Yes, sir.
I guess I would have to fall back to the state's engineer report, their head engineer stating that he doesn't feel that we would be affecting any water wells.
Well, I think that statement in there protects the wells that are in close vicinity to where you're drilling your well, and that would be something that they would be involved with if it can be proven.
I guess I've got a comment, and I'm not positive on water law, but it says affecting wells that have prior water rights. Most of the privately owned domestic wells, they don't have a water right permit. They don't need it if they're pumping under 18 gallons of water. So I'm thinking even those folks could be impacted, but they don't have something to stand on because they don't have a water right permit. And I just wanted to bring that up for the board's
That's
information.
True. Yeah, that's true. That's why they're not all permitted. But these ones that are listed here do have a permit.
Yes.
You know, and we could put homes on there, and it could use as much or more water than what this is going to use. We're asking for 4 acre-feet of water. We could put 6 homes on there that could easily use that much water.
Sure.
Easily.
Mr. Williams?
We're being asked then to support the RV, that's
what he's proposing.
Are we then partially responsible if we end up having a drawdown situation, which all the homeowners that are there will look at West Dakota?
No.
So, okay. So this is not in support of the RV park, it's in support of the homeowners. But no matter which, if we approve siding with the homeowners, I'm just trying to figure out how responsibility is then shuffled in the worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, they could sue the board. You could sue the board for killing his development.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, we're not a regulating authority.
Yeah,
We aren't.
No.
Which is why we should not be trying to regulate any homeowner or their business, because we do not have a final say. Us sticking our nose in it is just putting our hand out for litigation.
Well, we've done that before, not on the water side, but on the wastewater side, as you know.
On the wastewater side, we've given folks money to fix a problem, but we've not sent.
We've sent a letter to the DENR in support of an individual on a septic tank.
Just acknowledging a law.
So,
there's a difference between acknowledging the law and then ignoring the legal ramifications.
Go ahead, Tom.
I'd like to call the question.
Okay, question's been called. Any objections to calling the question?
Yes, I'd like to hear one last time from the gentleman. Like I said, this is.
The question's been called. We
want to hear from the gentleman. No, we have to.
We need to vote on the.
Has he been given public comment yet? Because you can call for public comment.
Is there somebody in the public who wants to comment? I don't see any.
Was there a second on calling the question?
I don't believe there was. Is there a second to the calling the question? All right.
Motion fails. Back to discussion, please.
Back to discussion. Go ahead, Nathan.
I wanted to comment on your comment. You're trying to equate apples and oranges together here. We came down on the side of one of our constituents. We did not get into the fray between two of our constituents and trying to pick a winner and a loser there. And that would have been inappropriate for us to do that. We did not do that. That's what we're being asked to do here. And I think that's highly inappropriate. Again, I don't think we should be involved in this at all, in any way. I don't even think that we should be having this discussion right now. I think it's all inappropriate, what we're doing here.
I guess I'm not sure whether, it's our business to be involved in this or not from support of group of existing landowners, that have wells and one that wants to drill a well. But I am concerned that, relying on the chief engineer's report and all the research that was in there, it's on a very wide scale on how they project, the recharge and the discharge. And we've heard some about, how much this really would necessarily mean or equate into a small area. So what I take away from that is that the groundwater system in that immediate area is not well studied or well known. So there is some concern on whether or not the water is available, or whether or not existing uses would be somehow compromised. So I think there's some role that the board could play in saying we are concerned that proceeding just under the guise of what we've got so far is a risk to both parties. The guy who drills a 400-foot well and the people that have existing wells. So in some way, I think it's worthwhile to say we have a concern about our water resources in the area that support development of various kinds. I'm not sure whether I want to take a side, on the deal, but I'm worried about the circumstances out there.
Yes.
I do want to mention, I feel for the homeowners. They have serious concerns. However, I can't put one of those concerns on his shoulders. If you guys have nitrate problems now, he hasn't built anything. It certainly wasn't him. If your wells are running dry, it wasn't because he did it. Those are underlying existing conditions. If you had come in and said, he drilled a well yesterday and my well ran dry today, that's something we could get behind. But when you guys have existing issues, I can't fault him for wanting to build a deeper well. I can say if the community came together and said we need help funding a deeper well for ourselves, that we can assist you with. We do have funds for community well development. That we absolutely can help you with. That way maybe when you guys can have a 400-foot community well that does feed your homes, or 2 community wells as you have now.
Sure.
But you mentioned nitrates, and I want to brought that up, since it's my well, I want to address that. I'm not blaming Justin at all for the nitrate issue, because he hasn't done that, but historically, for the last 11 years or so, the motel that was there has operated at fairly low capacity. The thing that's changed dramatically is how they operate. And so that commercial development has dramatically increased the amount of fluid that's going into the groundwater supply. And the change in nitrates in my well and adjacent wells, seem to be very timed almost exactly to that commercial development. So our concern is that additional commercial development, my house, you have 2 people. Hotel has 50. Right? I mean, it's dramatically different. I think Justin will have 100 people or so. So it's, the magnitude is, way, way greater with the commercial stuff than what it is for residences. So that's the change. It isn't that, I don't think that our community has changed the effluent that's being put into the groundwater at all. It's being made by the commercial development.
But you're not asking us to write a letter against the hotel. You're asking to write a letter against him, and his septic might be up to par where the hotel's is not. You're asking us to punish him because somebody else hosed you in the first place. We can't do that.
I have not found any system that is a traditional septic system that deals with nitrates. So I don't know if there's a technological solution using a traditional septic system.
Is your system going to be total containment?
It's going to be sealed on the bottom side.
Will there be a discharge from the system, or is it total containment? So that's what I understood you to say, so.
So you're gonna haul stuff off, is that what
No, it's evapotranspiration.
Pardon?
It's a mound system, which is evapotranspiration. It's pretty good size. There's several of those actually in Rapid City where they're sitting on limestone. You design them based on your usage and you figure out, what the evaporation rate and plants over and so forth. And there's several of them around here that function okay. I don't think the wastewater issue is.
Clear, so there's no discharge at all into the ground.
Not with that type of system.
Well, that's new information, and that's good news.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
That would really address, the letter we had written, says if the wastewater disposal can be accomplished in a fashion such as that, we certainly withdraw that concern. I guess I'd like to ask one question basically for Mr. Eisenbraun and the landowners. What is the number of homeowners, what is the number of homes in Pine Haven, and yours, Mr. Hearn, is separate than the Pine Haven group? Is Pine Haven plus you, is that kind of it?
Yeah.
What?
If you use the number that's in the road district, that would give you the most comprehensive number.
So what is the number of homes between the Pine Haven group and yours?
24.
24 homes.
24 occupied homes.
20,
3 lots that are unbuilt.
3 lots that are unbuilt, but 24 families. And whether it's, most of these are couples, you don't have a lot of, but anyhow, you would think at least 2 people per home. So
Yeah, between 2.5 people.
So what's the number of basically slots in the proposed RV park?
85.
85. So you would have like.
And 15 cabins.
And 15 cabins. So it's basically 100. And so whether there may be couples or some of them, but it's more or less 100 families or so during the time of year that you're there. So in essence, the amount of water you need is somewhere on the order of 4 times as much as the homeowners, other than, you're showering, some amount of laundry, whatever. So there's 4 times as many users, but they're not there like all day, every day. They're rotating. You can. Anyhow, that's been my concern, is there's quite a bit of additional demand that we're looking at.
We're only over 6 months out.
Right, I'm aware, but I guess the other thing, you'd provided the estimates, Lon, that Mr. Buhner, your well during the driest periods, it will run no more than 5 minutes at 5 gallons a minute. During a wetter period, you can go a little bit longer, but you keep hitting basically your flow limit. Do you have a sense of how much water than you actually produce in gallons per day? Have you done that arithmetic? I guess when I look at how you're trying to limp by providing 1 gallon a minute, you've got flow limiters, 1 gallon a minute. If you're in a similar situation, if that's all your well will produce, trying to split 1 gallon a minute, well, divide by 4, there's a pretty good chance you're just not going to have the water.
We're going to also put in a 20,000 gallon storage tank.
Right, but again, your demand can affect them. That's been my concern. So anyhow, we've kind of been around the block quite a bit on this.
Yeah.
Is there really anything else that we need to discuss?
James?
Comparing him to using more, saying he doesn't deserve it, it's like saying the city of Rapid uses more water than Wall, so let's turn off the city of Rapid's water. That's exactly what you're saying. He has a bigger enterprise, so he can't use more water, even though he's got a permit for it. He's going through all the legal procedures for it. I don't know why we're getting into the regulatory area when we're not authorized to get into the regulatory area, and pitting one taxpayer against another taxpayer, when all we're supposed to do is represent the taxpayer, not represent one taxpayer.
Would you come up here so we can be speaking to the mic so we can hear you.
Just to kind of clarify some of the discussion that has been going on, we have about 65 people in our whole area, 24 homes, 2.5 people per household. On average, it's estimated that a person will use 70, 75 gallons per day. That's 200 gallons per day septic for the household. The proposed park is going to be a minimum of 10,000 gallons a day. I actually think it's going to be closer to 20,000 gallons a day when I go through the math with the use. So that use is equivalent to much more than just our whole subdivision. And I have done the mass balance calculations. If we're already sitting with a nitrate level of 9, and I understand what people say, that we're not blaming Eisenbraun for that problem. But I will tell you this, I have written complaint letters to DENR, which are supposed to be confidential, which I have had to go public with to try to get some help. I have written letters to the county because the state has passed that issue on to the county after 5 months with the motel, and we have yet to hear a response. So when I see that we have a homeowner that is already exceeding the EPA limit, and we have our shared wells as well as a well in a community next door that is a publicly reported area, that we're all encountering the highest nitrate levels that we have tested, I can assure you that this kind of magnitude of development is not going to give us the opportunity to continue to have safe drinking water. I've got all those numbers. I have presented I have furnished all those numbers to DENR. We are going to get into that with the water permit hearing. So I understand that you have in front of you a report that is written by the engineer. But again, I have furnished information to DENR, and I look forward to that hearing because we're going to be able to air and hopefully get resolution on some of these things. So it is a very serious issue. I don't blame Justin for it. I'm just saying that there is a minimal amount of development that we can absorb. I also will tell you this, being a shared well owner that understands the problems in the area, I am one of other homeowners that chipped in money, and we drilled a well just right across Pine Haven from where Justin is. We took that well down to 600 feet, and we did not encounter more than 2 gallons per minute. There's another well that was drilled just to the left of that. They took that well down to 1,000 feet. It's for one home. They did hit 4 gallons a minute. And answering Mr. Driscoll's question, during dry times, I stick a stick down the vent of my cistern, and I know how much water I get every day. I know how much water is being used by the other people. And I can tell you that our well, during dry times, we average about half a gallon a minute. I do not get water any morning. I have gone 3 days without any water in my cistern. But we've been able for 20 years to make it work. So it is a critical issue, and just the magnitude of that development and the calculations that I've gone through tell me we're going to have a problem.
Well, we have a motion on the floor in a second based on this letter that Dan's proposed. So,
Do you want to amend the letter now with the wastewater disposal?
I think it speaks for itself that if it can be accomplished without adverse effect, we would gladly say I think the homeowners are consistent with that. So,
Whom would the letter be going to?
the letter would be sent to County Commission and to the state engineer. It basically poses the conditional use permit and.
Actually, the water rights.
Right, the water rate
engineer, yeah.
That's the state engineer.
Yeah.
Chief Goodman. Gene Goodman. Okay.
I guess I agree with what Ron was saying. That I think that there is a critical water quality, water quantity issue in that area that's not fully understood. And I think that is within our resolve to hopefully take a better look at it, or have the state take a better look at it.
Well, my comment is, I think under item 1 there, if there's an issue out there, the chief engineer and their department will have to get involved with those parties involved to, more or less, you're probably going to have to shut your pump down if you're affecting the well. That's the way I read this. This is kind of standard language, actually, but anyway. Did you have a question, Dan?
I wanted to know if we need to modify this motion, given the septic.
He already addressed that.
Okay, but this is what you're voting on, is what I'm saying.
Dan?
I could offer to amend, kind of my own motion. I could suggest one change in this letter. If we would go 5 lines up from the bottom, from the last of the wording, above, following that is sincerely Dan Bierke, Chair. So 5 lines up where it says, the West Dakota Board recommends against approval. If we would say the West Dakota Board expresses concern regarding the conditional use and water rights permits that are needed, and then in the following sentence would withdraw its concern as opposed to saying opposition. So kind of address your thoughts, Director Koth, in terms of making it, instead of a recommendation, we just express concern regarding the situation?
I would feel better about that in terms of us not being a regulatory body and kind of getting into that, but advocating on the behalf of all of the concerned parties out there, or the future users out there that aren't even moved in yet, about what's going on in that area. Yeah.
So I would amend, it'd be the same motion, but I'd suggest amending my letter as discussed, if there'd be a second to that.
I would second that again.
Okay.
So the motion has been made and seconded to amend the letter that was originally an original motion as per Director Driscoll's change, and I think we're ready to vote on it.
Well, discussion, you amended it.
Go ahead.
Why on God's green earth, if this is not regarding the motel, for his water application, do we ever mention the motel? It says right bottom paragraph of this letter, in correlation to the nearest use of the motel. He doesn't own the motel. He doesn't own the land the motel's on. His water rights don't affect the motel. We're going to use the motel's data to sink him.
It doesn't say anything about the motel.
Summer Haven, Pine Haven water wells. Am I looking at a different letter?
This is a summary
Is that the Pine Haven water letter is not yours?
What we're voting on is page 20.
Look on item number.
Which page?
Look in your packet.
Item 2.
Item 2, proposed letter.
If we're still in discussion while James is reading, I guess
Go ahead.
my thought is that we don't have any thing on the table right now other than Mr. Eisenbraun's application for a water right in this area to generate some kind of a more intensive look at this whole circumstance. So to me, that gives us a chance to look, as a board, act and say, we have a concern. Not to say your deal is a bad deal or they aren't doing what they need to do, but there's a concern in that area about water availability and the recharge in that small area and the uses. And maybe they need to do a little more of a general adjudication of all of these holes that are in the ground out there that they don't have a good track of, that isn't reflected in the chief engineer's report. Now, I don't know if we have to remodel the letter or whether we can just say we have a concern on that and it generates that message. But that would be my reason for wanting to support this, because I don't think they get it. They don't have all the knowledge
Yeah.
out there.
James, you got another comment?
Yeah, I mean, it's still just the nitrate levels that are existing. We can't pin that on his water request. The second part is you're requesting that he remotely access water. You're telling him to haul water from off his property. I suggest anyone on this board try that for a living and see how far that takes them. It is not cheap. It is not fun. First you go buy a truck, then you go get a water tank, then you go get a hose, then you clean your cistern a couple times a year, and now you try to do it for 85 people. It's ridiculous trying to tell a homeowner where to get their own water.
I would, question for you.
Go ahead.
I would suggest before you guys act on this, that you would talk to well drillers that drill in that area. I've talked to several. There's, I'll say there's plenty of water there, that this is not going to affect their water. Taylor Drilling, who I hired to drill my wells, has been in drilling wells for 2 generations. They said that there is plenty of water there. And it's just like Mr. Bolahaka said, you can go 60 feet. You could hit 2 different wells in either direction. We could hit a 20-gallon per minute well, or we could hit a 3-gallon per minute well. But it's not going to affect their water. There's plenty of water there. I think what you get, this is all overhyped dramatically. Interview some well drillers before you make a decision. Someone who's got some knowledge to it.
I would like to call the question. I think we're rolling through things
Okay.
over and over again.
Question called, seconded.
Gotta ask all in favor, we need a 2/3 vote
Yeah.
for the question call.
I did.
All in favor of calling the question indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, so we're, pardon me? Ready?
Yep.
Roll call.
Okay, we'll do a roll call.
Okay, roll call on the motion. Cole,
I'll vote for the motion.
Bjerke,
Aye.
Driscoll,
Aye.
Jovic,
Nay.
Williams,
No.
Mack,
Nope.
Bialotta,
No.
Harris.
Aye.
Motion fails. It's a tie.
Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is item number 11.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah?
Me take a
We'll take a break?
5 minutes.
All right,
69 inch.
we'll have the coffee pot.
Sorry, you guys nice.
Take a 10-minute break.
so
We got it 1 hour.
Well, I would support it. That's why I called the question in the first part, because I kind of knew the votes and where everything was going.
All right, it's 8 o'clock. We got a few more items on the agenda here to go through, so the time is ticking away. Item number 11, Dr. Chapman, Cheryl Chapman, Banner Associates is here to discuss possible future steps for the Missouri River Water Pipeline Project, and this is Director Williams.
Yes, I brought this because I felt that with our Missouri River project that we paid, or worked with the School of Mines and Technology, that when Dr. Chapman was introduced to me, that she has a lot of experience, both with federal, state, local, Indian reservations, and the Missouri River, and they all have to do with moving water. So I wanted her to come and just give a presentation to help us figure out what might be the next steps in a huge project. So, Dr. Chapman. And she also brought
Okay, go ahead
some
and introduce the
associates,
guest.
so I'll let her introduce them.
I shall do that. So, well,
We'd like to head a little close to that microphone there.
yes, I'll
So we
step
get it.
up right here.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Well, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for the invitation to talk about next steps after the important study that was just concluded by the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. As Director Williams said, I'm Cheryl Chapman. I'm Vice President at Banner Associates and manager of our Rapid City office. And joining me tonight is our President, Brad Wormers, and Tim McConnor, who has been the Chief Engineer of the Lewis and Clark Water Project on the eastern side of the state as well. And just to get started, Brad will talk a moment about who Banner is and the experience in rural water. So.
Thank you. Like Cheryl said, thank you for having us here. Banners has been around for, next slide please, Stan. Banners has been in South Dakota, well, Laramie in South Dakota for the past 73 years here. We're a multidisciplinary engineering firm, structural, environmental, wastewater, surveying, municipal, civil type work. 50% of our work, though, has been dealing with rural water type projects here. We're a staff of 65. Our offices are in Brookings, South Dakota. That's our corporate office, Sioux Falls. We got Cheryl out in our Rapid City office, and we got a couple satellite offices here. I think I want to have Cheryl talk a little bit why we're here. I'm going to have Tim talk a little bit about our Lewis and Clark project, like Cheryl mentioned. It's a large project. What are we up to? $500 million project with that? Pretty close to that here. So I'm going to let Cheryl talk again a little bit. Cheryl, as she said, she's been involved with a lot of public involvement type projects here. She joined our staff last year, and like she said, she is the office manager of our Rapid City office. So I'm going to let you take off, Cheryl, and maybe introduce Tim a little bit more. So thank you.
Very good. And we could go to the next slide as well. About 15 years ago, it hardly seems possible already, I was asked by a federal working group to convene a stakeholder group on the Missouri River for the purposes of developing a charter on how stakeholders from every walk of life could work together to develop strategies for the Missouri River. And that involved 8 states, 28 tribes, and multiple stakeholders ranging from hydropower to recreation, and all sorts of uses, including public water sources for communities. And in getting started with that, as oftentimes is with these big projects, a very daunting task is to find the people out there who are interested in those projects, understand what their goals are for the project, and invite them to be part of a larger conversation in where all the voices can be heard in developing the direction for those projects. And so after reviewing the work that was done by the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, it would be useful to think about a similar approach in that there are many people in western South Dakota, as you recognize, that go beyond the West Dakota Water Development District, who might be interested in bringing Missouri River water for use, beneficial use in their communities and in their areas. And so a good approach might be to go out and visit with people all over the western part of the state, from Rapid City to Union Center to Box Elder to Black Hawk, everywhere north and south, east and west in western South Dakota. And until we really begin to have those conversations, it's important not to make assumptions about what people's needs are, what community needs are, until we really open up that discussion. And after having those discussions, really assessing where the group is there a preponderance of people who want to move ahead and explore it further? And if so, let's document that. We know that different kinds of permits will be required over the course of a big project like this, and begin that documentation of the public involvement. The first step that we took when we did the Missouri River Recovery Implementation Committee was to just have general information sessions about what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, what the other blocks that might get in the way of moving forward, so that everybody begins those discussions with their eyes wide open in that. And so perhaps a similar approach might be useful, and wanted to present those thoughts and ideas to you to see if further discussion might be of interest to you as a board here as well. Tim, as our chief engineer for Lewis and Clark, has worked with that project all of the 30 years.
I started 30 years ago, but
Okay.
I've worked on it every day for the last 20 years. I have some familiarity with the project.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and Dan has pulled up the website for Lewis and Clark Regional Water System, and I think if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see kind of the geographic area. If you can envision that southeast corner of South Dakota there. And as we could imagine in reading the School of Mines report, these are not projects that happen in a year or two. They take a lot of planning, they take a lot of consensus building among the stakeholders that might have an interest in a project, and that changes too over the course of the project. And so being agile and working and with these kinds of projects is what really leads to its success overall.
Well, Lewis and Clark, we just celebrated last month at their board meeting in January, or 2 months ago in January, their 30th anniversary. They incorporated in 1990. One of their first acts was to hire an engineer. Fortunately, we were selected to be the engineer. Our anniversary, 30th anniversary of Banner working on the Lewis and Clark project 30 years ago in August of this year. We've worked with those folks from basically from the time when they were talking to who wants to be a member of Lewis and Clark. Some of you might know a lot about Lewis and Clark. Other folks here have never heard of Lewis and Clark before. It's a huge project, a huge undertaking. It's on the Argus Leader all the time. It's on KELOLAND News. Lewis and Clark gets a lot of good press. But one of the things that Lewis and Clark, in the early years, say 30 years ago, doing exactly what Cheryl did, talked about earlier, is talking to all these communities and getting together and, say, public meetings to see who had an interest in this. At one time, there were 60 members, people who wanted to be a member or said they were a member of Lewis and Clark. As the project got on and people were looking at it, and when is that project going to be built, and when am I going to start getting water, some people, it wasn't a good fit because they needed water within 2 years, 5 years. We have to build a new well. We have to build a new treatment plant. Lewis and Clark isn't our answer. And you may run into that as you go along too. But the project was authorized through Congress in 2000. So now we're going back 20 years ago. So from the time that they started the project, it was 10 years for them to go to Washington to get authorized by Congress. Also, they have state funding, so Lewis and Clark enjoys funding from all 3 states. They have funding from South Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota, plus the members. Lewis and Clark now, when it was authorized, had 23 members. Now there's 20. So even after they were authorized, some members dropped off. Other members have jumped in and done some things to taking out water. We are building the project. It took us from when construction started in 2003, 2004. We started serving water for the first time in 2012. So we've been serving water now for about 8 years. We're now serving 15 members of the Lewis and Clark system, and we will be connecting 2 more members in 2022. So we're pushing ahead. The goal line is in sight. Lewis and Clark, knowing how long it took to get this project going. This project right now is planned for an expansion from 45 million gallons a day up to 60 million gallons a day. We just gave them a report a month ago, 2 weeks ago, saying this is how much it costs. And we were thinking that the board members were going to have some sticker shock. Maybe they did. They didn't let it show. But these guys were ready. There were some of those members who were saying, how fast can we get started? How do we want to get started on funding and financing this next phase? They're even talking about the next Lewis and Clark 2. So these folks are planning ahead. So they started in 1990. They got water in 2012. They're planning projects after this project is over, which we anticipate about 2030 to 2032. Projects during the 2030s, projects during the 2040s. So it just takes a long, long time and a lot of patience.
We'll stop there maybe and ask for
I
questions.
have a question, Tim. The water right that Lewis and Clark has, who owns the water right? Is it Lewis and Clark, or is it the municipalities along the way? Is it the East Dakota Water Development District? Who actually has the water rights?
The initial water right that Lewis and Clark is using right now is Lewis and Clark's water right. So Lewis and Clark, for instance, it serves 3 states. You couldn't have Laverne, Minnesota getting a South Dakota water right. So it's under the ownership of the coalition of Lewis and Clark themselves. So that's part of the water right. Into the future, they have also acquired Sioux Falls, and Lewis and Clark have acquired some of the water right that East Dakota Water District, Jay Gilbertson has acquired. I think Sioux Falls might have, Lewis and Clark may have, it's been a long time since I've looked at the numbers, Dan, but I think Lewis and Clark has about 40,000 acre feet, and Sioux Falls may have about 60, something like that. They're big numbers.
Okay, thanks.
What's the source of the water for the Lewis and Clark system?
They're taking water out of they have a series of wells that are drilled along the bank of the Missouri River, south of Vermilion. So we're not taking, a lot of people think we're taking water directly at surface water diversion. No, we're taking water out of the aquifer. So we have groundwater rights, and that's what we're doing. We just had a pre-bid conference today. They're proposing drilling a large diameter, large capacity horizontal collector well. We're hoping we can get about 16 to 20 million gallons a day out of that well. It's a well that's going to cost us about $14 million, so it costs a lot of money to get that kind of production. Right now we're producing, on a peak day, we're producing about 24 million gallons a day. Average daily use is somewhere between 18 and 20 million gallons a day that the system is using. Yes, sir.
So those wells, are they considered groundwater under the influence?
Not now. The plant is designed to be able to treat groundwater under the influence, or groundwater surface under the influence. It's considered to be groundwater. That's where we are operating now. If it ever switches and we are classified as groundwater under the influence, we have the treatment plant is designed to be able to handle that circumstance.
Good.
And you also have experience with Mini Wash Day as doing the environmental, but also the design work, which is an intake directly from the Missouri River in that particular case as well.
And we started on that probably about 1993. And we have the pipelines constructed up to Eagle Butte, a water treatment plant. We basically have the raw water supply system set up for many, many years. Have a treatment plant that's designed for the future use, and the core line that goes into Eagle Butte. Now, what they're trying to do is get funding to continue expanding that system. When we originally designed that system, we were looking not only at Dewey and Ziebach counties, but a portion of Perkins and Meade County was also envisioned as part of that project. So Perkins County Rural Water is one of the partners who's interested in taking some water from that system.
What's the capacity of that plant?
I think it's 4 MGD.
One of the things that we talked about and why talking one-on-one with many stakeholders is that having a champion for these projects is so important in going forward. And sitting here today, we don't know who those people will be, but you know, working on building consensus, working on funding packages, working on all of the planning that goes into it is a huge commitment, and of the members in this case. And so building slowly, building that stakeholder support group, getting everybody rowing in the same direction is an essential part to really getting off on the right foot with a project such as this.
Do you have, can I ask a couple? That's my topic, right? With the building up of Ellsworth Air Force Base and the kinds of things that they're changing, do you have some sense of, will that bring a lot of people to this area? Or will the buildup of Ellsworth not be even included in looking forward? Because by then, things will already have been handled.
Well, that's a great question, because that is coming, and we're actually hoping the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force will be here next week, and we're hoping that she'll be able to give numbers of what the expected new personnel at Ellsworth will be. And we estimate that within 5 years, several of those people will be there, but maybe not all at once, a little more gradual buildup. And so I think other strategies, if there are water shortages and things like that, as Tim was saying, because these have such a long lead time, there may be needs that need to be met before it's ready to go. So it's more of a comprehensive strategy, that these groups can look at as well. So.
So from your guys' experience where you've done surface water and the groundwater at the surface water site, is it more prudent to get the groundwater near the Missouri than taking from the Missouri itself? Less treatment, things like that. Is it less costly in nature?
Well, again, you have to look at how costly is it to develop a well. I think if you look at the Missouri River in this location, you're looking at shales and different materials. What can you get out of the wells in that area? We never even looked at that as part of this project. We went directly to a surface water intake. All the other systems that are taking water, Mid-Dakota, Webwater, Washoni, they're all taking surface water intakes in that area. Where we are down at south of Vermilion, the well we're drilling right now, we've got 45 feet of very coarse sand. So we're taking water, we're taking Missouri River water. We're not fooling anyone. We're not taking, that is being recharged almost immediately. We're inducing flow in from the Missouri River, but it's going through there, and we're not seeing the water quality is such that we're getting good quality water.
It's going through the filter system.
Yeah, it's going through a filtering system. And we're treating, it's what we consider East River to be a very soft water. And it goes through a lime softening plant and delivering great water to the city of Sioux Falls and all their other customers.
Well, thank you.
Any more questions? Well, thank you for coming. Help from out from Brookings all the way out here. Appreciate that. And I guess we'll hopefully have further discussion as what we're going to do down the road here. But it's very good information. Thank you for coming.
Mr. Chairman, could I?
Oh, sure.
Is there a way that if there's any future talk, we can get back and ask for it?
Absolutely.
You to come
We'd
back?
be happy at a future meeting to come back with more detail if the board would be interested.
And how would we do that? Would we have to make motions?
Well, I would think that we would, as a board, need to decide if we want to move forward and what we, if we're looking at what Cheryl's suggesting, we could get a proposal from them to do some preliminary work or whatever. Something in that order is kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know what the rest of the board members are thinking, but that would be a possibility, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you again for coming.
What is the board's water rates?
Very good. Does it-
We have 10,000 acre feet in the Missouri River.
And the Rapid City has 60. I'll bet it was set up so that Sioux Falls and Rapid City got the same.
Well,
66.
initially, when they got these water rights, it was an Etsy pipeline that was gonna come through here, and that was the motivation for, at least for West Dakota, I think, to get the water right, and probably the city too. I'm not sure about the city, but, anyway, we've got the water right, and I do think, we did this study with the School of Mines, and as we were talking the other day, Cheryl, every 7 years we have to renew our future use permit and justify to the board, state board, why they should, we should continue with this water right. And I think this report that the School of Mines did is good information to show the folks in Pierre that we're serious about maintaining our water right and maybe using it down the road. So, Nathan?
I was just going to clarify that West Dakota has 10,000 acre feet. I think Rapid City has 66,000 acre feet, and then another entity called West River has 10,000 acre feet. That's Lyman Jones, and I guess they're already using about 5,000 acre feet of their 10,000 allocation. So, so kind of this whole corridor west of the river has allocations available to it, so.
Yep. Okay. I guess we're ready to move on to item number 12.
Another one of mine.
Yep, go ahead, Mr.
Well, I
prepared like an hour presentation.
Thanks, Jason, for coming and giving us a little heads up on what's actually happening at the airport. Things progressing along as you expected or not?
We're growing.
Okay.
We're growing. So I'll just show you a bunch of pictures. Depending on where you guys want to go with it, I got some data and stuff. But the project overall has been getting a lot of traction. We got inducted into the South Dakota Hall of Fame for the Act of Excellence Award, so that was pretty sweet. The airport's really happy. Last year we had record rainfall, obviously, so part of my main goal is to figure out, how much water do we need to provide these green roofs to get them to survive here. We didn't get to do any of that research last year. So instead I did some other research of, all right, so if we all have green roofs and we have our timers set up to water our green roofs that can do whatever we like, and then we get another rainstorm, if we're using these things to reduce stormwater runoff, how are they going to function? So those are some of the things, kind of some side experiments that I started doing with it and stuff. So this picture here just shows the installation process. We installed it. It's been almost a year and a half, so it was not last October, but October of 2018 when we installed it. It's a live roof system. They're trays. So you can see the tray system there, and then the little white edges that you see are called the soil elevators. So as you install them, you pull those, you do a couple rolls, pull those soil elevators out, and then you got soil-to-soil contact. So it's a tray system, but unlike some of the other tray systems on the market, this provides a monolithic system. Like it's one system where the roots can interact and it has soil-to-soil contact instead of other tray systems that are confined to that tray. So you essentially have hundreds of planter trays up on that roof. So the next photo just shows the green roof after the installation. Is everybody on the board familiar with the project?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the weather station in the right corner, and then you can't see one with that little triangular statue where the path kind of does a little backwards L jog. There's another monitor, and so West Dakota, you guys helped purchase all that sensors and the equipment that we're using to monitor the roof. It's continuous monitoring. Every 15 minutes, it's uploaded to the cloud, and I can access this data. We can get on there right now and see what's going on with that green roof. So I have it programmed for every 5 minutes. It's logging that. Yeah, so it's right there. So yeah, click on the graphs.
Oh, on the roofs side here?
So yeah, click on the graphs. So that's today, 2016. What military time is that? 15 minutes ago?
So that's showing our soil moisture for today. So I haven't looked at this for a few days. So you can see, so we've been thawing out. So the soil's thawing out. So now the soil moistures are starting to reach. So we're up at 16, 17% soil moisture. So we're doing pretty good. You know, usually when it gets down to about 10% is when we water. And so now, granted, this soil is a real gravelly, sandy soil, which kind of goes into the point the water quality was pretty good going through that gravelly, sandy soil you were saying. So the green roof is could act as kind of that filter system, although it's rainwater that's going on there. But with all these low impact developments, it's kind of that same idea of using the earth to manage our stormwater in an ecological approach. Can't really see what they're looking at. Their temperatures.
Yeah, these are temperatures.
So the interesting one is that that one where the cursor is. So that's the surface of the green roof. And then if you scroll, or the one above it is the surface of the black roof. Right adjacent to the green roof, there's a black rubber membrane roof. So that temperature is a little over 100 degrees. And the surface of the green roof is at 60 degrees. So it's holding heat. That black roof is holding heat, where that green roof is. It's not holding that heat. So everyone's like, oh, it's a great insulator. Well, soil is not a great insulator. What's happening is it's a heat sink. So it's not like you got this provided layer of insulation. You got the green roof, the soil, and the plants absorbing that heat. And so that flux going through the roof is going to be reduced, and that's where you start seeing your energy savings and stuff. So that surface roof, and then you got the surface of the black roof, surface of the green roof, and then the soil, the one on the very bottom, is showing the soil temperature at basically in the middle of the 4-inch system. So it's a 4-inch layer of soil within the planting medium is 4 inches. So that soil moisture, or the soil temperature probe is kind of right there in the middle. And then I got them layered through the P-rock system that's on there that they use to level it up. But you can see the dampening effect that it's having as it goes through that profile through the soil and the P-rock and stuff. So eventually we'll do flux calculations and stuff and see what that flux is going through there.
I don't mean to blow your mojo here, but since you mentioned it, do you have hard numbers from the airport as far as energy savings that they've realized?
They don't have any way for me to really track it, because so the green roof is sitting above the rental car, and so the rental car is connected to the whole baggage terminal area, and so they don't have a way of knowing of isolating it to the area underneath the green roof, and those doors are opening and shutting. And so we're trying to get some sensors through a Bluetooth or some way of trying to get some sensors up, on the bottom side of that roof, so we can try to get some temperature data within that, on the bottom side of that profile. But right now they just don't have any way of being able to isolate that area to see any kind of savings that they're possibly getting from the green roof. It's only a 2,500 square foot green roof, where the whole surface of that patio area is 5,000 square feet. So it's half of that surface is covered with the green roof. So, but that wasn't the airport's big thing. The airport's big thing was they wanted an aesthetic, pleasing place for people to go. And they definitely achieved that. Every time I go out there, there's people hanging out there. And Tony's like, we've never seen so many people hang out on the patio. So it's achieving that goal that they had in mind with the initial design.
So how much of the sensor network is for maintaining the green roof versus doing your analysis for the effect?
So we're looking at, so the soil temperature and the soil moisture, and then the air temperature. So, and then I'll show you in a couple more slides. We got an irrigation system that has a dedicated air compressor to the system. If you just click through, so I'll get right back to your question. This just shows you, so this is last April, so about a year from now. This is what it looked like, and I walked out there and I was like, oh no, this is not gonna go well. And then you click to the next side, and that was the end of May. So we fertilized right during that time after the snow melted off, so end of April, we fertilized, and we weeded throughout the year. 2 major weedings, and then just periodically if the airport was having some kind of press release, so we went out there and made sure it looked good. And, there was quite a bit of weeds. We'll see if it's, I'm under the assumption that a lot of those weeds, the seeds were already in the soil, the plant mix, when it came. So we'll see this year if it was, you know, how much more there is and if it's going to constantly be that big of a maintenance issue. Go to the next slide. This just shows another picture that's kind of in about July time frame. So that section right there, we're looking at, that's all 6 inches. So we wanted to see, does the 6 inches, does that do better? You know, because with 6 inches of soil, you could start having a more variety of grasses and different perennials versus that 4-inch system is all sedums. Next slide. So this is the irrigation system. So we're using the sensors. We're looking at the soil moisture and that. And so I got alarms set up. So the goal was to be able to use the sensors to control the irrigation system and have it be completely automated. It's not as easy as I thought it would be. So right now, I'm the automation. But I have it on my phone, so I have the 2 Rainbird clocks on my phone. And so when I got alarmed, so the hobo who I bought the sensors from, they claimed, oh yeah, you could use it to control your irrigation system. So I set up all the relays to do it, and it wasn't working how I thought. You know, there's water in it, it was windy out, you know, so it was above 20 miles an hour, don't wind, don't turn the water on. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, don't turn the water on. You know, above 10% soil moisture, don't turn the water on. So I set up all these relays, and come to find out, only one of the relays control. So I was like, well, that's, what one do you pick? Is it the wind? Is it time of day? Is it the moisture? And so I think you guys, that's kind of a, I don't know if anything bad. But, so we have the compressor. 1 clock on the left controls the water. The one on the right controls the air compressor. And Rainbird's like, oh, that's not going to work. When one turns on the other side, it's going to turn on the compressor. And I said, well, all right, we did it. And it's working fine. Nick came out, and he's like, that's pretty cool. And it was all working. And we haven't had to, well, I have used the compressor. So we have had to use the compressor. The whole idea is that we have such erratic winters. When it warms up and thaws out in the middle of the winter, and it's thawed out for 3 weeks, your plants need moisture, even in your yards, your landscape. You get winter kill. So if you don't have that provided moisture to it, even in your trees and your plants outside, and you wouldn't think, oh, you need to water in the wintertime, then you start seeing winter kill. So the whole idea is we could be able to turn this system on, water, blow it out, so when it freezes at night, the lines are cleared out. So we have used it a few times for that purpose, but luckily we've had pretty good moisture and haven't had to use it too much. Next slide. So this is kind of some public outreach. Those are just different pictures of people using the green roof. They're out there. The one on the top is kind of shady, you can't see, but all those tables are pretty much full of people hanging out. But the one in the upper left corner was, over the summer I worked with local teachers through a RET program at School of Mines. So we had local teachers, 4th grade. I think the 2 gals were 4th grade, and then the guy was middle school up in Lemon. And so they helped do the green roof research and then kind of wrote lesson plans and then took that back to their classrooms, and they're implementing studies kind of around sustainable stormwater management and green roofs and low impact developments. And so it's a cool thing that these roofs are really being used to broaden that educational benefit from it. So it's been a really cool project. Another thing is the EPICS program. It's a School of Mines engineering projects for community service. And Dr. Chapman's the head of it now. And so we've had 3 computer programmers, software engineers, nobody that knows anything about civil engineering, green roofs, anything. And they're helping develop a website for the kiosk display. So to have this interactive learning kiosk at the airport. And so they're going through this process of learning about green roofs to be able to have this interactive kiosk display. So they're getting a lot of traction and a lot of use for educational purposes. So other than that, where it's going good, we needed to not rain so we could kind of figure some things out. Water quality testing was kind of an issue. We needed 5 days of dry down, and that did not happen very often last year. And when it did, it was middle of the night or I was out of town, and so we didn't get any water quality testing done last year. So hopefully we'll be able to get that water quality testing done. So there's still the funds available for that water quality testing, and we're within everything's within the budget that you guys provided to get everything done. Besides, all the work I'm doing is kind of free, pro bono. All the other grants that I tried to get never happened. And
that was your Hall of Fame pay.
So if you guys got any questions, all the rest of the slides just show different data that I put together and some runoff reduction data and stuff like that. So I know it's getting late, and I got kiddos at home right now too. So
I appreciate you coming down and updating us on your project.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay. Item number 13. It's under me.
Thank you very much.
In the packet, we got a letter from, addressed to me as the chairman, from Director Rollinger, indicating that he's resigning his board of directors as a board member because he relocated outside of Area 5. So we need to have a motion, number 1, to accept his resignation.
So moved, sir.
By Tom, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Linda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed, same sign, motion carries. Dan included some information in the packet relative to what we're going to do about the vacancy, advertise the vacancy, and request petitions submitted by May 4th, which is 7 days before our regular meeting. And the notices will be advertised in our official papers twice, mid-March, and that should be mid-April, not mid-May. So do we need a motion for that, Dan, or is that just a standard procedure?
It probably wouldn't hurt to have a motion and just have everybody agree on that with the change that it's April rather than May.
So moved.
Moved by Dan Driscoll, is there a second? Seconded by Bob Williams. Discussion?
I have one question.
Yes.
Are we going to be advertising this one and our second one concurrently?
No.
No.
No, they would be separate.
Is there any chance we can, or is the timeline wrong? I'm just thinking about funding the paper cost, sending one notice versus 2 separate notices. Just one longer notice.
Timeline is wrong.
Timeline is
For
wrong.
one thing, yeah.
Okay.
And I think we'd be violating the law too. I'd have to double check that part of it, but yeah, when we get to the next one, the timeline is already kind of started on that. Whereas this is a little bit delayed relative to the 2468 vacancies, upcoming vacancies.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, motion's on the floor. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 14, update on vacancy announcements due to expiration of terms for directors for areas 2, 4, 6, and 8. And Dan's included some information in the pack regarding what we were just talking about, I guess, as to what we're required to do as far as advertising. Do you want to talk about that, Dan?
Sure. Our only role is to advertise, and then we try to provide people with the information they need. As far as the petitions and all that side of it, the election itself, that's all Secretary of State. So I don't know if I cited the law that defines what we're required to do, but basically it has a window, and Director Harris looked at it too, and so we're basically just complying with the law that we have to advertise 2 consecutive weeks in our newspapers, in our official newspapers. And the text is down below, which is same thing on our website, describing the areas. And it's kind of I talked to Jay Gilbertson at East Dakota just to kind of get an idea of the best way to word this, so it's based basically on how they would do it, but that's where that comes from.
So do we need a motion then on this item?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's just standard
FYI.
admin requirements, yeah.
Okay.
So unless somebody...
Is there any questions about that, Dan?
Are we going to be late then?
No, we're in
Before the March
compliance.
deadline? Just barely?
Yeah.
When does it hit the press?
Well, the first notice already went out.
Okay.
We have, I forgot the dates, but we actually would have time for the second one hasn't gone out yet. That'll be Thursday, I believe, for the Journal. Hill City Prevailers. I can't remember if it was Wednesday or Thursday, but
Okay.
we should be legal.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Item 15 is action on the admin contract renewal in April. Report from the committee, and Tom, you're chairman.
Yep. First off, I'd like to thank Bob Williams and Linda Harris helping me. What we did is we looked at the last 4 years of everybody that submitted a contract for the admin job. We looked at it. We asked Admin Mullally to come up with a contract of a proposal. It was reviewed by the committee. There were some suggestions changed, but it is pretty much the same cost as last year, even though we are dropping from 12 to 7 meetings. The committee looked at that, and he was still $14,000 cheaper than anybody in the last 4 years, so we decided that was well. One item that we are looking into, and which will also be part of 16, is the admin is requesting South Dakota State holidays off, and we will discuss the possible policy amendment to that in the next thing, but I would have to say the committee suggests approving the contract. Does anybody from the committee have any other comments that they would like to add?
Nope.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Lyon, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jovic. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carried. Thank you guys for doing that on that committee. Appreciate that. And item 16, policy 26, hours of business amendment.
So Dan put this in the packet that is right beside you. I will read what I am suggesting for policy 26. We cannot vote on it till May. We will not have any interference with the contract because there is not a holiday that falls under this category. We are adding the language in policy 26 saying the office will be closed on South Dakota State holidays of New Year's Day, which is January 1st, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, floating Monday between January 15th and January 21st, Washington's birthday, floating holiday between February 15th and February 21st, Memorial Day, floating holiday between May 25th and May 31st, Independence Day, which is July 4th, Labor Day, floating Monday from September 1st to September 7th, Native American Day, floating Monday, October 8th through the 14th, Veterans Day, which is November 11th, Thanksgiving Day, floating Thursday, on the 22nd and 28th, and Christmas Day, which is December 25th. Staff will post alternative office hours 2 weeks in advance of the holiday at the office. So it is not that he will not be working whatever holiday. If it falls on a holiday, he will have alternative hours, and he will notify 2 weeks in advance at the office. So that is the proposed change. It cannot be voted until May.
Publicized?
Public.
I have a suggestion. Why not just say legal holidays as defined by SDCL 1-5-1, which also says, list the days you've listed, but also says all days that are declared a state holiday by the governor, which typically is the Friday after Thanksgiving as well.
And Easter Monday and Good Friday. And I took what Dan had put in the contract as in the language. So
That's just a suggestion.
thank you.
Does this have to get publicized as a policy change, or just
Well,
on the agenda?
We have to vote on it at the next meeting, right?
At the next meeting, but it's supposed to be notified to the board 30 days in advance of the vote.
So this is the
Okay.
notification.
Yep.
So the 10 days? Director Harris?
At least 15 days prior to the meeting, at which amendments are to be considered, 15 days.
Okay.
So we have to do that email business again? This
Well,
doesn't cover it?
if we're changing it, I wasn't sure if you guys wanted to take that
If you change it right
suggestion.
now, then the next meeting is more than 30 days.
It's more than 30 days, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot more.
Yeah. So,
So are we wanting to put it as what?
as suggested,
Do you mind if I get the codified law? I do apologize, Chuck.
Pardon?
what was it, number?
What was the codified law?
SDCL 1-5-1.
So we are looking to change it from the office will be closed on South Dakota holidays that fall under SDCL 1-5-1. And staff will post alternative hours 2 weeks in advance of the holiday at the office.
Okay. Very good. So noted.
Is that what we're going with then?
That is the suggested
So we'll vote on it
language.
next time.
But we won't vote on it until next time due to the requirements of giving you guys a minimum of 15 days notice.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Yep.
Okay, that was item 17. Action on Article 5, right, the bylaws amendment regarding conflict of interest. 2/3 vote required. Mr. Williams, Director Williams.
Yes, that's what we voted on, and I think, was it published, Dan? The correction?
I believe Director Harris sent that out. Is that?
Was it published, though? Didn't we have to publish it?
Well, not publish it. You have to inform all the directors.
Okay. So then my question would be, did everybody get to see this? And then make a motion to approve. I'd make a motion to approve.
Okay,
Second.
motion and second to approve the amendments to Article 5 regarding conflict of interest. Are there any discussion?
Do we have a good idea of what perceived by a reasonable person means, or we just get ourselves back into one of these new ones again?
Well,
I don't know.
yeah.
That's why I'm asking.
That was go ahead. I don't have an answer for you on that.
That's as defined by usually the courts.
Yeah,
The courts usually decide what a reasonable person would, like if you work for a car dealership and you want to sell the board a car, then a reasonable person would suggest you have a conflict.
I use this because it shows up in several of the state and federal references that I went through 3 meetings ago. but Maryland had, or Massachusetts had the reasonable person, and I just basically, what I'm looking for is the appearance of a conflict of interest as perceived, as understood, or by a reasonable person. And I don't know how you define that reasonable person. I'm sorry. I feel like
Mr. Jasper can probably weigh in on this, but I think there's that standard verbiage. I mean, the reasonable person standard, I think, is pretty common in most law and litigation out there. I've seen it in many different contexts. So, and I would defer to Mr. Jasper if he's willing to share anything on that.
I was told to write not so that you can be understood, but so that you cannot be misunderstood. And I view the wording here as somewhat ambiguous. It's possible of more than one meaning. But if you say, when it says, shall disclose to the board such conflict of interest or the appearance of conflict of interest to a reasonable person, that's assuming the board is a reasonable person. And therein is where I say there's some ambiguity. What you need to say is so that a reasonable person viewing it would view it as a conflict or the appearance of a conflict.
Sure.
But hey, it's your policy, you do what you want.
I have the same concern about having that word in there and creating problems down the road for the board. I really do. I personally, I think that, you know, we've used the bylaw that we have now is used in other water districts. I mean, that's where we got most of that language from, and I don't see a problem with the way it's worded now. So I'm not going to be voting to support the change.
Well, as Mr. Jordan pointed out, the reasonable person in the legal standard, it's a well-established definition of what a reasonable person is. You know, we talk about the reasonable man standard. Sorry, women, but
anyway, that's my feeling on it. But is there any other questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion?
There's one down again.
Right. Oh.
Based on Mr. Jasper's comments, would we want to slightly revise that motion? Revise the verbiage? It sounds like it would be it wouldn't be a major change. What you're recommending?
well, if you have legal counsel, why don't you have them clarify?
No.
I'm not paid to do this.
We could always use the South Dakota version as well.
I'd be more in favor of doing that. But I would be more in favor of doing that than, you know, I don't know. It's just that's my gut feeling. But I guess there's a motion on the floor right now. If there's an amendment to it, it's, you know, it could be on the table.
So just a comment, maybe what we do is vote on this and get something established that might be better for us than what we've got right now, and then we can look at it again or ask our attorney to look at it. But at least we get something on the books.
I'd agree to have the lawyers look at the language because, you know, that's why we have one.
Should we postpone this to the next meeting then, or
Well,
what are you suggesting?
Table it.
Because you're the motion.
Yeah, I know.
And who was the second?
I was.
You was, okay.
May I make a
Yes,
substitute?
go ahead.
That we send the proposed change in the conflict of interest policy to the lawyer to try to get better wording, so we do not have the ambiguity
Of a reasonable person.
of a reasonable person. So I would, my motion is to send the proposed amendment on the bylaw, Article 5 of the bylaws, to the lawyer for review.
That would be a substitute motion.
Yep.
Is there a second to the substitute motion? James, okay. There's this discussion on the substitute motion.
I'd agree to this. I mean, I think it was a good idea, or it would have been a good idea to have our lawyer look at it.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion?
Well, I guess my comment is I think what we have currently does the job, and I don't know if we really need to do more, because if somebody you think maybe later has a conflict of interest, the board can address that. If somebody
No, we
didn't.
can't. We can't because there's no policy.
Yeah, we have to have a policy that states what our conflict of interest is, or what.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, but we have something right now.
Yeah, it's only in the form of a financial gain.
Yes.
And also, it doesn't really cover the problem that I had was, when I brought it, was because we were having a conflict within our board that talked about an individual's right from being on another board or another government agency, either federal, state, or local, not being it appeared to my constituents that it appeared as a conflict of interest. Okay, I'm not sure how I should say it politely, but because of that, we had an initial, firestorm in one of our meetings, which I don't agree with. So I still would, I'd like to have this resolved so that future boards would at least have to look at it to get rid of it. And the standard that I grew up with was a conflict of interest by physical means, if somebody's paying you money to bring their attention to your group or whatever, and or you couldn't even have the appearance of a conflict of interest, which is a broader concept than just having it look at the financial, which is probably illegal. And we didn't have that.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that what we have right now I don't think is adequate. We proved to ourselves that just by virtue of our own inaction that we can't deal with it based on what we've got right now. There should be something additional to make sure that it doesn't happen.
Now, did somebody second?
Bylaw
second. So we do have a motion. Is there any
substitute motion.
Yeah, so the
You have to
substitute
send it
motion.
to attorney.
Yeah, so any more discussion? So we're voting on the substitute motion then. All in favor of the substitute motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay?
Did you have an objection?
I voted no.
One no.
Oh, I didn't hear anything.
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. My Director Driscoll. Okay, moving on. Item 18, April Hydrology Conference. List of directors in attendance and approval of additional funding if needed. Tom?
So, hydrology conference is coming. Galen sent out an email. It looked like all the directors received it back in January, 3 days after our January meeting. And I know that sometimes the conference tours get booked up rather quickly. And so I wanted to put this on the agenda to get a hypothetical who's going, if the conference is going on. So this is just a topic to figure out who's going.
Let's just have a raise of hands who would like to attend. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4.
Can I make a note that I sat on this board for 4 years, and I have not gone once when a lot of other people have gone multiple times?
I think everybody could go.
Yeah, the whole board can go.
Yeah, but
One,
is
are
it
you going?
responsible?
No.
So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we get 2 gratis, right?
Yeah, 2 are included, and I don't know what the cost at this point is for extras. It was either,
Thought it was $35.
well,
No.
I thought it was 100 or 75, depending on if you got on the early bird. I
Oh.
would have to look that up.
According to the.
So we'll have to figure out what the actual cost
Well, we
is.
gotta get the names of the people that we want in there.
See, it's in the packet. Before March 27th, it's $75.
Okay.
After March 27th, it's $100. But we get half price, so cut those in half.
Okay.
Do we
need probably a motion to approve,
Do we need to authorize Dan to get all of us signed up?
yes. Yep. Is there a motion to that effect?
Gail, I don't know if we need it, but I'll move to do that.
Okay.
We authorize
Since-
approval for all 6, or whoever it was that wanted to
It
go,
was
and
6
that
of us.
Dan make the arrangements for all of us.
Very good.
I'll second.
Seconded by Linda. Discussion.
I have a question, maybe it's a technical question, but when I get those solicitations, it says that the general public doesn't have to pay except for the lunch. But professionals who are seeking, continuing education credits always need to pay. So what category are we really in?
Good question.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just asking. Because we already are paying them a couple $1,000s a help.
Do you know?
No, I don't really, but
They've charged us in the past.
Galen did say that to me, that we get half price on additional registrations, and that implied to me that he kind of wants us to go in that category.
Okay.
But that's all I'm going on.
So
I agree with Ron, but
I just don't know.
I suppose just, you're not really a general public because you are directors of the board. So that's kind of a little bit of a different topic.
Mm-hmm.
General public would be like these guys that are not members of the water board.
Okay.
You're not professionals, and that's why we give you the half price. You're not looking for getting
The credit.
the
We're-
credits,
Continuing education.
hours for professional credits.
Is the half price not because of the sponsorship?
Well, that
I think it was because of the sponsorship.
Yeah, yes.
I think a professional pays the professional price. It's kind of an honor system, and I think our
Yeah.
board should pay that, and we do get a half price for being the sponsor. I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, I am too. Any more discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Who made that motion?
Nathan did,
And I
and
second.
Linda seconded. Okay, that moving on to item 19, proposal to hold a stakeholder listening roundtable session as a special.
Could I get the names real quick? Just
Nathan, Dan Driscoll, Linda Harris, Dan Bierke, Ron Coth, James Barlotta.
And then we should also ask who wants to go on a field trip. There's the 3 field trips.
Oh.
Like Tom, Mr. Mack said, they get filled up, especially the one for the geology, the Black Hills or the Northern Hills, that one we're only looking at.
Okay, are those listed on, has your website been updated? Okay.
I think so.
There's no additional cost for that, though, right?
No, there's not, but.
But we need to get, maybe we can, I guess when we do that, Dan, maybe the individuals that want to go on those field trips can get the ones to Dan.
Okay, I can send out an email and you guys can let me know.
Dan?
I've already told you on mine, I'd like to go on that geological one.
Okay.
Dan?
Did we ask if our program manager wants to attend?
Yeah, he's one of them.
Oh, you're one of them,
He's one of
okay, sorry I missed that.
Yeah, he's in.
I thought,
Thank
Good.
you, thank you for.
I thought we had an oversight there.
No,
I could see a
I was counting his hand. He was the first one I counted. So we're on item 19, Dan Driscoll.
So a year ago in June, we had a stakeholder session, well attended. We'd had quite a few comments from stakeholders that they perceived it as useful and wondered if we might do it again. A couple of us have talked that it's something we'd ought to put on the table. So in a minute I'll have a motion. I went ahead and made a tentative reservation for the same room. It's basically 2 rooms combined that we had used at the Game and Fish Outdoor Center for Tuesday, June 9 for the afternoon. If it turns out we vote not to hold such a meeting, we can unreserve it, but this would have to be as a special meeting since our regular meeting schedule is May and July. If we'd vote to move forward, then probably I'd suggest that we have a committee to, work out the details and bring those details to our, May meeting. But this would allow us, if we vote to move forward, we could send out a heads up to, previous attendees and interested people to save the date. So with that, I'll make a motion that we hold a stakeholder listening / roundtable session as a special meeting on the afternoon of Tuesday, June 9.
Motion on the floor. Is there a second to the motion? I'll second it for discussion. Is there any discussion? Ron?
Just as a comment, I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago. It was one of the Cracker Barrels, and I had a couple of folks come up and tell me that they, number one, they wondered about some of the topics we talked about and what the status was. And number two, that they liked it, and they were wondering if there was some other thing happening in the future where they could ask questions about, some of the things they were interested in that was discussed a year ago. So there's at least somebody that remembered and was wondering about another kind of a go at it in some fashion or another. And they approached me at a Cracker Barrel.
Okay. James?
I would like to make one simple reminder. This board is not stakeholder funded. We are taxpayer funded. You, by scheduling a daytime meeting, are basically telling only working people for government agencies can attend this meeting. That their employers will not let them leave work. It's not for a vote. That they cannot attend a public meeting because we want to make a special meeting just to spend their money. And didn't we just pass last meeting the annual calendar? And already here 1 month in, you're wanting to adjust it already to change the need.
I agree wholeheartedly with Director Bialotta's comments. Our stakeholders are taxpayers. I understand that several people on the board here have worked for governmental entities and may have strong ties to those governmental entities, but those people are not our stakeholders. They're not the people that we should be beholden to. We answer to the people that pay taxes, not to these bureaucrats. And it's not our job to go out and find new and interesting ways to spend taxpayer dollars. If there are legitimate needs that exist out there, then those needs should be presented to the board, and then we would consider them. We shouldn't be going out of our way trying to find projects to spend money on. I don't think that's what we should be doing. It's frustrating for me to, I mean, we had this exact same discussion a year ago, and that precipitated all kinds of angst on the board here, and now we're going back and doing it again. I don't think it's appropriate.
James?
Not only that, it seemed really obvious that members of the board who had previous job history invited those contacts. They skipped the city of Keystone. They skipped the city of Hill City. Nobody called Wall. Nobody called the actual other people who pay taxes, who are actual government agencies that could have used the money. And then one director goes, well, is Hill City even in Pennington County? That's absolutely ridiculous. Just ridiculous. You know, you basically shunned the actual part of the community that could have benefited from these tax dollars, and you wanted to hand it out to the big fish that have plenty of our tax dollars already.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, the motion's on the floor.
I was wondering if you could repeat the motion, Director Driscoll. I tried to get it here, but I think you had a time.
Afternoon of Tuesday, June 9.
Okay. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 Can we have a roll call on this?
Yeah, roll call.
Roll call on the motion. Code.
Aye.
Bierke.
Aye.
Driscoll.
Aye.
Jovic.
Nay.
Williams.
No.
Mack.
Aye.
Bialotta.
No.
Harris.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Since it's late, 9 o'clock, I don't have any comments. I don't, under chair, items from directors. Any items? Ron?
I have one item. I think I talked about it last meeting, that I had met with Dr. Waterman and the Game and Fish to talk about what might be some future steps to help embellish and add some of the missing items to the study that we funded for, more effective, more efficient management of the Pactola Deerfield system. So we carried on with that, and Director Bierke and I met with the City of Rapid City to talk to them about their perspective on, getting engaged with that kind of a plan. We're only managing a small portion of that reservoir system right now in terms of water use, flood attenuation, et cetera. And so we met with Dale Tech, the Public Works Director, and we met with Dan Kuhn, the Assistant Public Works Director. They both indicated that they wanted to do some more review of the mine study, but they were, I guess they were kind of receptive to the idea that they'd look at this and, yeah, probably sometime down the road we needed to do more active management of those reservoirs for the various purposes, and that maybe next month or whenever, we would maybe even try and get involved to talk with the Bureau of Reclamation, who actually is responsible for those impoundments in terms of the structures, to see how they would feel about, getting engaged to add some predictive capabilities to the model that's been developed, so that we can see how we can do a better job of essentially managing what we have here, instead of only fluctuating up and down maybe 4 feet from what's currently the guide curve elevation. There's a lot more storage there that could be beneficial to flood attenuation, municipal water use, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of questions to answer about what's possible and what's not. So still kind of carrying that forward, but just an update on that discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any other items? Dan?
I met Thursday of last week with Pennington Conservation District. Nothing of particular consequence to report.
Okay. Seeing none, is there any items from the public?
Are you gonna ask the rest of the directors, or are we exempt?
No, I asked you.
No, and I had my hand up down here.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're not.
So, I just heard two interesting things, and at the last meetings, we discussed board members going on behalf of the board to talk with different agencies, which is odd because you have it on the agenda. And you're admitting going with another director on behalf of the board to the city of Rapid for a spillway project that, may I remind you, the Bureau of Rec said no to this at last year's roundtable. Not only did they say no, but you personally threw her under the bus as incompetent, not knowing she was in the room when she stood up and told you she was in the room. That is absolutely asinine behavior, where you call somebody out for not knowing their job in a room full of people, not even knowing she's present, because obviously you didn't know your job. Now, Driscoll says he met with the Conservation District. And yet I see on the agenda representing the board at public meetings. I must be freaking confused. You are calling the kettle black.
Well, in terms of what I did with Director Bierke,
You went with another director, represented the board, and discussed board actions.
you were informed at the last meeting we were planning to do that, and we wanted to continue to explore the possibility of carrying forward some of the work that we had already funded. So,
And the Bureau of Rec said no.
the Bureau of Rec at our last listening meeting, as I recall, which I don't have any notes here, talked about their inspection program and how they weren't really concerned about the gates at this time. Because at that time, we were talking about remodeling the gates to allow for operation from a certain release point to a certain high release point that's now precluded because of potential damage. That may all be a discussion item in the future, but we didn't have the results of the thesis at that time that really showed the magnitude of how we're not using that reservoir system to the greatest public benefit. So it's probably a little bit of a changed circumstance now.
You know, far be it from me to tell other people how to do their job, since they're the ones in possession of the reservoir in the first place. I guess I just have a problem with is do as I say, not as I do on this board.
Well, it wasn't a public meeting. It was a meeting between two people at the city and
Public
people at the
officials.
board.
Public officials and bureaucrats, okay.
Whatever you'd like to characterize it as, I think it's a pretty valid purpose of what we do as a board to kind of look out, similar to what we had here tonight, and looking out for possible use of Missouri River water. This is possible use of water resources that we already have here.
Even when the agency in charge of that water told you no, and you had the audacity, this board and board members, throwing that person under the bus, telling her she was new and probably incompetent, at a public meeting, no less.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Point of order, this discussion is completely beyond the context of items from directors.
Well, if I wasn't interrupted, maybe I could have spoke, because nobody interrupted you when you spoke.
Are you through? Are you done now, Director Bialana?
I'm done now.
All right.
Next time, I'd like to carry on my session without being interrupted. Nobody countered your topics while you spoke.
Items from admin. I'm sorry, I was going by that one, Dan.
Okay, I'll just be quick here. We had joined as members Black Hills Resource and Conservation and Development, and I kind of been trying to follow what they're doing. It doesn't appear like they really are very active, so I tried calling their executive director, Brian Dale, who resigned.
Oh.
But I guess the bottom line is it looks like they're just, they don't really have any substantive meetings or anything like that, so I'm not recommending we renew.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Can I interrupt on that one?
Sure.
I just attended a meeting for the Black Hills RCD.
they have a quorum?
They had a quorum by phone call, yes.
Okay.
They have hired a new director. He's a young guy that has just moved back to the area and are gonna try and get these meetings going again.
Okay.
Because they've got some more topics that they feel that it's good to keep it going.
Okay, fair. Maybe he wants to come address the board sometime then.
It'd be nice to meet him.
Scott Guffey from Pennington County Weed Pest? You might want to maybe drop him an email and.
What was his name?
Scott Guffey.
Guffey?
Guffey, Guffy.
Okay,
I believe he is the president now.
okay, thank you.
Who does he work with?
Pennington County Weed Pest?
That's within planning and zoning. Scott has been one of their more active members.
Yeah, he's been there a while.
Okay. And then this kind of fell off the radar, the CD investment suggestions I had. There was a committee formed. This was before Director Rollander had his health issues, and I'll just put it up here again. I think it still makes sense. Interest rates may be lower now than they were, but that's my suggestion. There were a couple changes to the codified law regarding water development districts, and one of them was to remove the word disability as causing a vacancy. And then there was one or two minor things about, after the meetings, I had to mail the minutes to the newspapers, and now I can just provide them via email. So those are the only two things I can think of offhand that really affected us. There was a proposal to expand the Vermilion Basin, or Vermilion Water Development District, and East Dakota was going to give up some of theirs, but that was dropped. They decided not to do that this year. And I want to thank the board for renewing my contract. I'll continue to try to promote the Water Development District and work with the directors. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to compliment Dan. I think you're doing a great job. Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to continue doing this, especially at the same cost as what you've done in the past. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, items from public. Is there any items from somebody in the audience? Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, we'll go to, that was item 23. Item 24 is mine. A little background. The reason I put this on the agenda was I was contacted by a Rapid City council person who sits on the Rapid City Public Works Committee. And at their February 11th meeting, one of our directors, under the items from public, spoke to the Public Works Committee about, and represented himself, identified himself as a West Dakota Water Development District board, on the board, related to an item that was on our last agenda when the City Public Works Director, or the City Public Works Department was here with a letter of interest to ask us if we wanted to partner with them on their development of the update on their stormwater management plan. And he did send me a link to that meeting. I had Dan send it out to everyone. I hope everyone had a chance to look at it. But included on the back page here is our policy regarding representing the board at public meetings. And I'll just read it. It says, if a director, contractor, or employee is representing the West Dakota Water Development District at a meeting or other similar function, they will represent the board based upon decisions or policy made by the board. If they voice their opinion, they must distinguish this representation is not a position or decision of the board, but their own. And the most appropriate action is to bring a question raised back to the board to render a decision. This policy does not apply when a director is representing the area or responsibility. I put this on there, I just think we need to remind all of ourselves, if we are presenting ourselves at a public meeting, and we're voicing our own opinion, we need to follow this policy. And that's all I have to say on that. Number 25.
Do we have any comment on that?
Sure.
I'd like to suggest that we have our lawyer look at this as well. The wording in this is ambiguous. It's just like our other policy of conflict of interest. And it goes along with possibly meetings that may not have been public, but they were with more than one or other city officials. And we need to have some way so that when I asked Dr. Chapman to come, it's because I thought it would be a good idea for us to have that information presented to everybody at once. And it would be very handy for our legal official to come up with language that would tell us that would define for us what a public meeting would be, so that a director may go and talk, especially when it has to do with his district, to a planning board or other group that has control over that.
I think the key word here is that, our board took an action on that item at the last meeting.
Okay.
And so we were directed by the majority vote of the board to send that letter to the city, and which we did.
Right, but you guys acted
And
before you had that.
Excuse me.
No, you went there, you said we went there.
Sure.
The board approved us continuing to work with the city.
You went
on
that
matter.
before we wrote the letter. You admitted it.
Go ahead, Tom.
So here's my thoughts on the matter. Like Mr. Williams, he went and saw Dr. Chapman. He discussed with Dr. Chapman the possibility. Mr. Williams was acting with his consistency and acting as himself, not as the board. As long as Mr. Williams says, I am a board member, and this is what I think should be done, I would like to bring it to the board, that's fine. It's fine that, let's say, if Mr. Williams and I'm talking, James, let me finish. I don't talk very much at these meetings, so please let me have the time. That if Mr. Williams and I went to Dr. Chapman and said, we are interested. We are the two members. We are not promising anything. We are looking into the matter. If you bring in another board member, let's say I say, without Director Driscoll's permission and Director Harris, that the board members of 1, 3, and 5 believe that this is what should be done, and they are unaware, nor have they agreed or signed anything to agree, that's where I feel Policy 6 is in violation. So, James, if you have opinions on certain things, feel free to give them. Feel free to reach out to people. I approve that.
So is there
as long as you keep it to as you and not as the board. As long as the board as the whole is not addressed as the person bringing up the comment without approval, doesn't matter where you go and look at it.
I'm sorry, is there somebody accused of violating Policy 6?
Well, you've accused...
I'm not accused.
No. I asked the question, is there somebody accused of violating Policy 6, and if so, how?
We had a representative, a Rapid City Council member.
And did that...
Excuse me, I'm talking.
I asked for a yes or no.
I'm not giving you yes or no. I'm telling you what happened. I was contacted by a Rapid City Council member.
No, you're back.
And
Dan Coons, you got in trouble.
And he's the one that, I didn't know you were going to that meeting.
Nope, and did I say I represented the board?
Yes, you certainly
No,
did.
you better, okay, I move that we go into executive session because you mentioned me by name and you're accusing me of violating a policy. Do I have a second? You accused me of violating a policy and you mentioned me by name. Now it's a personnel issue.
Second.
Motion second, go into executive session. All in favor? Let's have a roll call.
I think we have discussion first, don't we?
Nope, not for executive
Not
session.
executive session.
Normally you specify in the motion.
Yeah, what's the purpose of the executive session?
Because I was accused of violating a policy and mentioned by name. Now it's a personnel issue. So in the motion, we're going to executive discussion to discuss a policy violation where I was mentioned by name. And now I'm going to bury you.
Okay, do we want to specify a law? That's normally how it's done.
Policy 6.
That's
Violation.
not South Dakota codified law.
It's part of the policies and rules of the board. Any discussion of any policy violation, rule or member is privy to executive session. It's a personnel matter, and as such, goes to an executive session.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
you've got it on the agenda. So obviously there was an intent to do this anyway, so.
But we got to vote on it.
Yep.
I'm just waiting for him to get it up there so we can vote on it.
I guess do I have this, Director Bialata?
Yep.
Okay.
The entry you're referring to is 1-25-2 SDCL.
Yeah, I think you want that in there, but I'll do what I'm told.
Because that says,
He's got it.
Yeah, but somebody has to tell me besides.
So, do you want to modify your motion to cite the?
It doesn't have to cite the codified law. It can be assumed that we're following codified law.
But he's got it, so.
Yeah, 125-2.
SDCL.
Subsection 1 says disclosing the qualifications, competence, performance, or character or fitness of any public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee, and the term employee does not include any independent contractor. So that's the statute.
Did you say employee?
No. Or elected.
Public officer.
Yeah.
So I have South Dakota Codified Law 1-25-2 parentheses 1. Is that the description? Okay.
It's in the agenda item.
Everybody understand the motion?
Yeah, I guess it was in the packet too. I couldn't look there. But,
Okay. We'll have a roll call vote on it.
Okay, roll call on the motion. Code.
Aye.
Can't hear you.
Aye. Bjorky.
No.
Driscoll.
Just we'll air it out. Aye.
Jovic.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Bialata.
Aye.
Harris.
No.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, where will the public go?
Back into this room.
You guys need some pillows?
There is a separate room over here if you're continuing to stay or if you want to go, that's fine too.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a couple-minute break here?
Sure.
Okay, I'm gonna stop.
We get kicked out of here at 10 o'clock.
So
We got
there is
25 minutes.